All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, welcome to Fellow Travelers, a Ziggy's Running Slow podcast. No,
Presented by Fates Wide Wheel.
yes, there you go.
Or do you just keep adding titles?
Here's
on?
exactly. Yeah, it's just gonna get longer and longer. No, I'm Sam Fain for the defense, and joined by my co-counsel Dennis Freimeyer. And this week we're going to be talking about Ben's song for the defense, the latest episode of our beloved Quantum Leap. What a great episode it was, Dennis. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I was worried you were about to make me the prosecutor, and I'm like, no, I like this episode. Don't make me the prosecutor. I mean, I can come up. I have some minor quibbles that don't really have to do with the story itself, but just we'll get into it. I'm doing great.
Right.
Listen, listen, viewers, this is going to be a relatively short recap part because we have 2 interviews coming up, and I'm going to let Sam talk a little bit about those because he kind of took the lead on those this weekend.
Sure, yeah. So we are so lucky to be joined by not one but 2 special guests this week, recorded in 2 separate interviews. We spoke with the writer of the episode, Romy Loor, and so excited, so thrilled. She informed me after the fact that it was her first interview that she'd done, and I was just so thrilled. And I told her, I was like, well, good. Now the bar has been suitably set low enough that it's all going to be upwards from here.
It's only uphill,
right?
She
was super kind. Really engaging. Lots of great stuff to say about the episode, about her process, about working with Dean. A little background on her: she started off as an assistant to Dean. She worked in a lot of different areas prior to that, but just her pathway towards Quantum Leap, which she talks a little bit more about, but. She worked as an assistant with Dean for a few years before getting the opportunity to write this episode, and she did it. This is her very first episode of television ever, which is pretty incredible because it's pretty great. So she's wonderful, and look forward to sharing that with you here shortly. And then after that, we get to speak with none other than Jen herself. We're joined by Nanrisa Lee, and she's fantastic. We had so much fun talking to her, also about her process, about the character of Jen, about working on the show. And I think it was one of those situations where we start, we hit record, we start talking, and before you know it, 90 minutes has gone by, and you're like, oh gosh, I hope we haven't wasted their time.
Yeah, I mean, I will say we went for 20 minutes before the interview, and then we went on for about a half hour chatting after the interview.
I mean, maybe even a little bit more than that.
More. It was a lot of fun. She is good friends with a guy who I was roommates with in Chicago like 12 years ago. And he's one of those folks we haven't kept in contact afterwards. I mean, we're Facebook friends, but we haven't really kept in close contact. But he is one of those, he is just a genuinely wonderful human being. The occasional times I hear from him, it's so great and wonderful. That was such a great time in our lives, living in that condo in Irving Park in Chicago. Hi, Toph. How you doing? I didn't mention it during our interview, but back in September, he sent me a Facebook message. He was like, "Hey, give me your address. Don't ask questions why." And I was like, "All right." And so I sent him the address, all right, I'm going to send you something in the future. Don't know when I'm going to do it, but I'm going to send you something in the future. So after our interview today, I messaged him, why didn't you tell me you were friends with Nanrisa from Quantum Leap? And he said, oh, I was going to send you something from her related to the show. I just never got around to it. So that's what's going on. So yeah, it was fun. It's a very small world. It's a very
right. I know. Absolutely. Like I said, she's wonderful and just so engaging. And she had even mentioned prior to the interview that she had just visited with him because he lives in Pennsylvania now, right? And she had flown out to the East Coast. And so she had just visited with him before flying back to California. And for us to not for us, not for the interview, obviously, but that she would be in California while we were doing the interview. And just wonderful. It was so great to hear about pretty much the entire arc of her character of her work on the show thus far. I mean, we pretty much start from the audition process all the way through to Ben Song for the Defense, and it was a really wonderful time. And it is certainly on, for me on a personal level was super engaging, just because I love it when we get to talk about acting and we get to talk about that process. It's something that obviously we're pretty familiar with, and it's always wonderful to have that type of discussion. And we got to do that a bit obviously with Caitlin as well. But this was great. I'm really looking forward to sharing these. I think people are going to enjoy them, so those will come a little bit later. But first, I think we have to thank some more people besides obviously Romy and Nanrisa and Dean and everyone who works on the show. Special shout out to Piper, an editor on the show, and yeah. So Dennis, take it away, sir.
Greasing the wheels. No, here we go.
Oh, of course.
Right. We want to thank some folks. We want to thank Owl's Place, Leap Fan Side, Bourbon and Boardgames, Carolyn, Cosplay Dad, Joanne, Bartlett, Dana Bius, Rich Bourque, Kevin and Kevin Butcher, Carol Davis, Deckslower, Dermot Devlin, Barry Donovan, Brian Dreadful, Troy Evers, Larry Ganni, Jason Geis, Kelly M. She is a new patron. She bought us a few coffees. Thank you so much, Kelly. Michelle Hoffman, Kelly. Amy Holtcamp, Laurie Johnson, Bess Korey, Lady Eternal, Robb Nunn, Oddly Specific with Audra, Christopher Redmon, Adrian Saul, Karyn Saxon, Jerry Seward, Mike Stoufer, Heather Strabiak, Damon Sugarbelly, Larry Trujillo. Larry, I saw your message on Facebook about a get-together in the St. Louis area. I am not ignoring you. I just haven't been on Facebook a lot lately, but I am all about that. Stuart Williams, Joe Wilson, our anonymous donors. And as always, a special shout-out to Jessica Conger and Betsy Freimeyer, our spouses who provide vile childcare while we record our show, and especially this weekend. Daylight savings time, the cruelest time travel. Yes. If you would like to become a patron, a couple different ways. If you want to do so monthly, you can do it through patreon.com/fateswidewheel. One time, buymeacoffee.com/fateswidewheel. That information is in our show notes. If you would like access to our patron stuff, which honestly right now are just our live watch parties every Monday night, there's a new episode. We're going to get some more stuff out there once these two tired dads get some other stuff going on. If you would like our patron perks, but you are not in a financial place to do so, we'd like to be as inclusive as possible. Head on over to our website at fateswidewheel.com/patron. Fill out our contact form, drop us a thing. We'll sign you up. You'll get stuff in our email.
Absolutely. I want to do two things real quick. One, I want to call myself out for not having the opportunity to mention this, for blanking on it, to mention it to Dennis earlier. Adrian Sal. We've been pronouncing your last name slightly incorrectly. We've been going with the Saul, and it is Sal. And you were so kind enough to drop us a lovely note that wasn't only restricted to that, but you did mention it. And I'm so sorry that I forgot to mention it to Dennis ahead of time. So Adrian, obviously, we love you. You've been such an awesome, wonderful supporter of the show for such a long time. And I'm sorry that we didn't get that right. And furthermore, that I failed to correct it. I'm putting it on me. It's not on Dennis. Completely 100% on me. So we'll make sure that in the future is always said properly and with the respect and love that it deserves. Now, moving along real quick, I did want to mention that, of course, as usual, we hope that you are working and endeavoring to set things right where they might be going wrong in your community or in the world at large. We really appreciate all of your support, financial or otherwise. But if you have the opportunity to do so, certainly before you think of us, think of some of those wonderful causes that are in such desperate need right now of your help. And that would include... I recently tweeted this, so you can find it on our Twitter account for websites for all of these, but that would include outmemphis.org, transempowerment.org, the Campaign for Southern Equality, working toward LGBTQ equality in the South, Transgender Law Center, TLC, the Trans Justice Funding Project, the Transformations Project, and of course the Trevor Project, all incredibly worthy causes and of course so necessary right now, as there are so many completely wrong-headed, hateful, horrible bills being pushed through state legislatures across this country targeting the trans community and trans youth specifically. So anything we can do to help, we certainly want to amplify as much as we possibly can. It's certainly important to both of us to do so. And as always, of course, these are just suggestions. We're not telling anyone to do anything.
I was going to say, can I get on my bullshit here a little bit? Yeah. So we had someone like give us some pushback on Twitter last night for suggesting these charities, like you said. And I will say, Quantum Leap is obviously a show about putting right that once went wrong, and suggesting charities, donating to charities, getting behind the causes that these charities support. Let me just put out the idea that it is under the purview of talking about Quantum Leap, because putting right what once went wrong is also very close to putting right what is currently going wrong. And while time travel, as it is presented in the show, is obviously not possible, at least not yet. I don't know. But anyway,
not to our knowledge.
Yes. There is the idea of what would Sam Beckett do? What would Ben Song do? And you can put right what is going wrong in little ways in your community. So just just gonna put that out there.
Yeah,
anyway,
absolutely.
And
I think obviously even more so, I think, just to say real quick that these are incredibly salient to Quantum Leap, considering the episode Let Them Play, and obviously the incredible representation that we've seen on the show across the board, not just in Let Them Play. And I think that it matters. So yeah.
Absolutely. So we're going to keep our recap a little bit short. Famous last word.
You've doomed us.
I know. So the idea of keeping a recap short is that we want to put all this out in one episode. We got these great interviews with Romy and Nanrisa coming up. And so we may come back later, back during the summer. We may do a longer recap of this episode if it so moves us. But just for the sake of time and not wanting to put out multiple episodes this week, we just want to put one out. And I will say, go ahead.
Let me just interject real quick. Here's something that I've been tossing around, thinking a little bit about. And I think that this has been done before, quite frankly. So this isn't like, we're not putting our stamp on this, but something that we're tossing around for when the show goes on its hiatus before season 2 is maybe even recording some audio commentaries for the episodes with special guests, which I think would be a lot of fun. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. But yeah, I think that there's always been some part of us that from the beginning has been motivated to revisit these episodes later, just because we're recording these after 1 or 2 viewings over a weekend, getting it out there so that we can just kind of have that initial reaction. And I think that much like we've done the revisited stuff with the classic series, it'd be fun to do kind of revisited stuff with the revival as well, should the opportunity arise, which I believe it will. So just to your point, I wanted to kind of add that in briefly.
Great. So with that, I would jump right in. I'll start off with my non-spoiler thoughts. I just really enjoyed the hell out of this episode. Not to fawn over it, but I really, the only critical note that I have is it's overall production, what I would love to see in more episodes, but I'll get into that later on. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I think it is more proof that this series is finding its voice. It can really stand on its legs doing just straightforward normal. I think I texted you right after I watch it. I think this is the best episode so far, that it's just straightforward, normal, no huge development in the HQ story, no huge twist or reveals. It's just a nice contained self-contained story. You get a good HQ story, again, like SOS. It is perfectly everything at HQ has to do with the leap. You get a nice Jen-centric episode, which was so many lovely moments all around. We got another Back to the Future reference, which obviously I love. You don't see it, but over here on this wall, I have Back to the Future 3, and of course I got the out of time license plate over here. So I'm always there for the Back to the Future references. So
2 weeks in a row.
So 2 weeks. Yeah. So I love how Back to the Future has just become our shorthand. I love it. So yeah. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I just thought it was a damn good episode from start to finish. It was interesting to me after SOS. I thought, how are they going to top this? Not that they needed to top this, but certainly how are they going to match this? And SOS went from strength to strength to strength, and I feel like Ben's song for the defense does the exact same thing. It goes from strength to strength to strength, and it's a high quality episode. And I feel like we, as fans of the show, are really getting an embarrassment of riches since coming back from that winter break, that holiday break, because it's just been an incredible run of episodes, and this was no exception. I thought that it was just dripping with all of the 4 H's: heart, humor, hope, and history. And I loved the way that there was, just wonderful subtext and nuance around some of those things, that it wasn't necessarily in your face, that things felt very well earned. They were built to within the episode itself. Like if you watch this episode in a vacuum, all of that would still stand. You don't necessarily, not that I'm not saying watch this episode and none of the rest or anything like that, but this episode works so perfectly just on its own and stands on its own 2 feet so well. And I really appreciated that a great deal. Obviously, I love the lore. I love the myth building. I love the overall story arc that they've got running, and I know that we're going to get to that very soon. And I'm really looking forward to to starting to get those resolutions to the overarching story. But that said, this episode felt like, and I've said this like 3 times already, in the interviews that we did, but it felt like this just really wonderful breath of not fresh air. I want to amend that statement of different air. And it was really nice because it was that great reminder of like, man, this show can just keep being so many different things in different ways, in different configurations, right down to who's going to step into the imaging chamber this week. And I really dug that. And overall, I just think it's such a winner. And it's noteworthy because it's, a first-time writer, right? I think that's incredible that they come out of the gate with such a strong episode, and you'll hear from Romy later about the the genesis and the creation of the episode, which I think is fascinating, from her point of view. But yeah, just high quality all around, wonderful performances, some incredible chemistry between Ben and Jen, and just seeing, Ray and Nanrisa kind of play off of one another was so much fun. And of course, like you said, too, the project stuff supported the leap so well, and seeing what was going on at headquarters and how they were working with Ben, basically working to support Ben and not necessarily working on their own thing, which might thematically tie together, which I always love. I really enjoy when they might be working kind of on something a little different that's not tied directly to the leap. And it ties together thematically. I think that's always wonderful. But the fact that in this case it is so, married up to what's happening on the leap, it was very strong and provided us with some, some great moments of levity, and also, again, drove home the heart at the end of the episode in particular. So it's definitely a winner. And it's just kind of like, wow, we've got 3 more episodes left, and if the quality continues on this level, what an incredible first season! What an incredible first season already. Yeah,
absolutely. Someone posted on Twitter a little bit earlier that somebody was asking, somebody posted like they haven't had a chance to see in the new Quantum Leap. Is it worth it? And one of our followers commented back, there's like, the first season is great and nostalgic. Oh my God, Quantum Leap is back on TV. The second half of the season is genuinely some of the best TV that's out there right now.
Yeah.
And I absolutely agree. Worth noting, to get in some geeky stuff here, host of Fate's Wide Wheel. So we don't have an exact date lockdown, but we are in April of 1985. Somewhere coming up on April 15th. You said that off mic before we started recording because the AIDS March, the AIDS Ride is referenced.
Yeah, the International AIDS Conference, which was in Atlanta in April of 1985, which I believe it took place over April 14th and April 15th. And of course, Stuart the biker later on will say that that's where the charity ride that he's going to go on in memory of his uncle who died of AIDS, or complications of AIDS.
For sure.
That's where they're going to start it. And so I think, I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what he says, but he might even say a week or something like that. So it's clearly early April 1985, and we're in Queens, New York. Yeah, and Ben has leapt into Elena, last name I don't have in front of me, Elena Ramirez, excuse me. And he is a public defender, and immediately leaps in, of course, to an interesting situation with defendant Tyler.
Absolutely. And I love this is the first episode where they really kind of call attention to Ben's dress as a woman, other than
Yeah.
the bounty hunter episode. And I posted this on Twitter. It's like they call attention to it. They make some slight comedy out of it, but it's not like in your face comedy.
Yeah.
That some people might see as problematic now, like trying to like milk comedy out of a man in a woman's dress, which could be seen as a little bit transphobic. But yeah, they don't go there. I love how the entire episode they don't make a meal out of it, but Ben never quite gets used to walking in heels.
Yes. There is a moment right at the very beginning where he approaches to make a statement on behalf of Tyler, and he is clearly wobbly on the heels. Mm-hmm. It's a testament to Raymond's physical capabilities as an actor. And this is something that Nanrisa mentions later in our interview, just how incredibly adept he is, because there is this, it's something that I think you could almost just like not even pay attention to, but he recovers in such a commanding way, and yet not overconfident, not, like you said, he doesn't make a meal out of the fact that he stumbles in the heels. It's just like heels can cause anyone a problem. I'm sure. Forgetting it's like, oh, I didn't even know I was in these things. Okay. Now I'm back. But it's this wonderful bit of like physicality on Raymond's part. And and yes, there's a little bit of humor to it, but there's also, there's an awareness to it that I think kind of speaks to the heart of what you're saying about how there is something humorous sometimes about the clothes, right? But not because he's dressed as a woman. It's more because these clothes are so outdated by any of our standards. That's kind of what they lean into even more. But I just again, it's worth noting that Raymond is just such a wonderful physical actor and brings so much to the table. And that little moment for me, it was definitely one that I kind of was like, oh, that's good stuff. Like the way that, he recovers is just so wonderful.
Yeah. And it should be worth noting that, so we're in April 1985. We are in one of the few leaps where we're in the realm where we could have some crossover with Sam Beckett. So Sam was in, I believe, in New York. No, not New York. They were on the other side of the country. I think,
San Francisco, right?
Temptation Eyes. Yeah, they were in San Francisco. Never mind. But anyway, so he was just there in February in '85 for Temptation Eyes. I want to know what love is. I want every time.
I had to buy that song on iTunes just so we could use a clip of it in our podcast.
Yeah, and then April '85, Dr. Ruth. Which April '85, Dr. Ruth, that would have been in New York, right? I think
that would have been in New York. Yeah.
So not. I mean, I think Ben has leaped out by this point because Dr. Ruth took place on April 25th, 1985. But again, the nerd in me just has to ask, like, is it intentional that Ben never crosses paths, like even like the same like date and time?
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, one of the things to kind of geek out over in addition to that is the thought that like the Sam Beckett, the leaper, right? Yes, is out there leaping. Sam Beckett, the human being who is yet to leap, is also out there. And you got to figure in 1985, what's Sam doing? He's probably working, is he working on Project Starlight at that point, or is Starbright rather, or because I don't think we have like a specific timeline set for all of that. But anyway, that's interesting to think about. The idea that you've got a 30. I always forget the year that Sam is born. 32. He'd be
32. Yeah.
32-year-old Sam Beckett. Or no, I guess he'd be 31, right? Because August of 53, or is it August of 52? I don't know. Look.
August 53.
I love this show, so he'd be 31. But some of these details on occasion.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Sure. But anyway, it is interesting to think about. And you wonder, I think the possibility, it's funny because obviously there's so much conversation about wanting nods or Easter eggs or wanting to have this addressed or that addressed. And that's valid. It's valid conversation, even if it's not something necessarily that's running through my mind. And I think that is something that's sometimes important to remember when having these conversations is it's like, look, anything could happen. Like everything's on the table, So I think that it is just interesting to maybe speculate about the idea, like you're saying, well, we haven't had a lot of opportunities for that crossover. And now, when we see Ben in an era where maybe Sam could be leaping around or Sam Beckett could just be out there walking the streets, before he's ever left. It's interesting to think about the possibility of those sort of, crossovers, connections, glimpses, kisses with history in a very different
yes.
way.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not a quibble in any way. It's just like fun stuff that I like to geek out about. The thing I will quibble about, Sam, is just for the love of God, put the dates on the screen. Like either with a graphic, or like you've said before, like in some way, like on a newspaper, or in the very opening moments, like lock us in, like the bounty hunter episode, like a few minutes in, like they lock us into Princess Diana's wedding, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Like lock us in and give us a date. And the thing is, and this is a thing I loved about Let Them Play that we just never brought up in our conversation with Shakina. What I love in particular about that episode is not only do they put the date on screen, but they find a way to do it within the context of the episode, because it's done. I'm not sure what the name of the font is, but it's like that high school athlete school spirit font.
Yeah. Right.
Which I absolutely love. And like when that came up, like Betsy pointed out, like they are missing such a great opportunity in every episode. They could do that with every episode, is put the date on the screen, but do it in the style of whatever episode they are doing.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things that I don't necessarily miss it, certainly while I'm watching the episode, but after the fact, I mean, you do kind of wonder, it's like, when was that set? Especially because, like, for people who like us who are geeking out over the show, have had a podcast for as long as we've had about the original show, and the original show did that, right? Gave us the dates on screen at the beginning of the episode. It's funny because JJ Lindell, friend of the show, awesome artist, amazing, all around good human, created a concert tour t-shirt for Ziggy's Running Slow, which was sort of based off of some Twitter interaction, and he included dates for every single leap, being each one being a tour date, and they were obviously, some of them had to be sort of fudged a little bit here or there, because specific dates weren't necessarily given. He did include Sam's birthday for one of the dates, which I thought was great. Not the year, but it was August 8th, which I thought was fun. But even looking at the shirt, it did run through my mind. It was just sort of like, oh yeah, we don't have specific dates for those things. And so yeah, I would love to see that, even if it's something just supplemental, you know what I mean, after the season is over, and then maybe in next season we'll see more of that, or maybe not. But I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I will say that, and this could be this is total speculation, could be total bullshit. If you're someone who works on the show and it's total bullshit, feel free to call me out and say it's total bullshit. But I've noticed that the only episodes where they put the date on the screen is after it's 1990s or after.
Oh,
like the earliest one was 1993 for
Atlantis.
Paging Dr. Song, Atlantis 1998, and they've done it for every post 1990 episode except for Family Style.
Okay.
And a part of me wonders if that is not a network decision, because they don't want to put a date like 1962 or 1936 on the screen, because they're afraid of scaring off viewers in the first 5 minutes who think like it's set in two period of a piece and they're going to lose interest.
Interesting.
That just crossed my mind in the last week. But I think it's weird that the only time we've gotten dates on the screen are 1990s or after. Again, if you work on the show and you listen to this and that's total BS, feel free to tell me. But that just crossed my mind the other day.
Yeah, well, look, if anyone out there is listening and knows, feel free to provide us with the answers. Let us know what your thoughts are. And my hope is, and it's something that we even talked with Nanrisa about, is that we do get some sort of physical release. And I know based off of some of the stuff that we've heard, that is actually something that has been, if not actively like discussed, it has certainly been something that, oh yeah, maybe that's a possibility. Like there's been at least a conversation about it. Now, whether or not it actually happens, or whether or not that conversation was any sort of like, we should have DVDs or anything like that, if some sort of physical media gets released for the show, it would really, that type of information would be super cool to have. Just because I do think that there's a desire for it.
Yeah. I mean, anymore, don't they put out at least a Blu-ray of like any successful TV show at all?
No, actually, in fact,
Really?
a couple of years ago, they stopped. It used to be just that's what they did, right, for every show. And a few years back, they slowly started halting production of physical media for like just every show, any and every show. Some shows still get it, you know, and some shows don't. It's really strange. And when it comes to like Blu-ray and 4K, there are quite a few shows that don't see release on Blu-ray or 4K. They only get like a DVD release because it's a more expensive format. And it's very strange. I hope that corrects. Part of it also is because streaming, you know, is
I was gonna say, there it is.
Yeah,
there it is. If you gotta stream it, you gotta keep paying out that dough. I love you, Peacock. Don't.
Although to be fair, though, I will say that a lot of the streaming services, you know, obviously like Peacock, like they're streaming the show. However, you can still purchase digital episodes like on iTunes or Amazon, or you know what I mean? So you can still purchase individual episodes or full seasons digitally, and they're yours to keep, you know, as long as...
Sure.
Right. But yeah, I don't know. I do think that there is a stronger possibility for seeing a physical media release for something like Quantum Leap than there is for, say, you know, Chicago Fire. Just because I do think that the type of fandom that follows a show like Quantum Leap is certainly more likely to buy a physical release than, you know, the type of fans that follow some of those other shows. That's not a knock on those shows. I think that's just indicative of the way that people consume, you know, their media. So,
sure.
Yeah. There's a tangent.
Yeah. There we go. like we do.
Right.
What are some other things we loved about this episode?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad you mentioned that. First of all, shout out to the guest cast. Incredibly strong guest cast. I feel like we could say that, you know, pretty much every single episode. This is no exception. Dean Cameron, famous for playing Chainsaw in Summer School, amongst many others, but I recognized him and I was just sort of like, oh my God, that's Chainsaw. Plays Saul, who is an attorney that helps Ben out on occasion. Clearly has a bit of a rapport with Elena and is kind of, you know, even suggests like get into private, like get out of being a public defender, you know, it's an awful gig or whatever. And again, gives Ben, you know, some important information along the way. Enjoyed him a great deal. Edward Gelhaus, who plays Stewart the biker. What a wonderful role. What a wonderful performance in something that absolutely subverts our expectations, I think, and leads us to one of my favorite bits of history in this episode. When he's trying to get his bike back, you know, and because Elena had helped him with his case and his motorcycle was impounded and he really wants it back. And, you know, he's asking Ben, help me, you know, get my bike back. And Ben obviously is overwhelmed with everything else that he's doing and, you know, meets Stewart outside the courthouse one morning and, you know, it's like, hey, I really need my bike. And of course, Ben's like, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm going to get your bike for you. And then Stewart lets us know that the reason he needs his bike is because he's participating in a charity ride for AIDS, because his uncle lost his life due to the virus. And it's just a really wonderful moment. And I loved it so much. I love that it tied into the very real International AIDS Conference, which was organized, you know, by the CDC. A couple of other organizations took place in Atlanta in 1985 at a time when you have to remember that the president of the United States had still not acknowledged the disease.
Yep.
Let that sink in, right? And I just thought that it was a wonderful moment where, again, I hope that it would motivate people to be like, wow, it was 1985. You know, there still had not been any sort of professional medical organization, you know, holding a conference to address this. And again, it's one of those moments that I just hope can instigate people to, like, you know, after the show's over, you know, hop on your computer, hop on your phone, get on Wikipedia, whatever, and take a look and learn a little bit more. And then for those that are in the know, I do think it's just, it's a very moving moment. And I really, that was just one of my favorite bits, to be honest with you. I really liked that a lot.
Yeah, I love it. It was like I was talking about with Family Style a couple weeks ago, like where it's possible, like, you can have that touchstone in history. And like you said, like, if you want to know more, you can get online afterwards. You can learn more about it. But it does not in any way distract from the main point of the episode or make the episode about that. We just visit on that. And also, I love the additional payoff at the end. Like, we don't just have that character there to talk about that. We have the payoff of giving Ben the ride to go get the murder weapon.
Right.
So they
Stewart finds the gun.
Yes, that's what Is this a gun? Is this what? Yes. And that was just, I think at the moment, like where they showed the scene of them like pulling up and Ben is riding on the back of the motorcycle, that's when I decided I absolutely love this episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it was lovely, and again, yeah, what a wonderful visual too, right? Like seeing Ben on the back of the motorcycle with Stewart. Michael Garza, who plays Camillo, you know, again, just what a wonderful turn, and just seeing this youth having taken on so much, you know, being the breadwinner for his family, taking care of his grandmother, taking care of his younger brother Leo, who's played by Isaac. Arians. Oh gosh, I probably messed that up, and I'm really sorry. But just yeah, again, wonderful performances by both of them. Seeing the real stakes for Camillo, and the fact that, like, you know, he is willing to go to jail for 10 years. You know, but like he just needs to get this over with, right? You know, then he's willing to go to jail for 4 years, right? He's willing to do that, even though this is a crime that he did not commit, just in hopes that, you know, he can try to do something for his family. And obviously he also doesn't want to do that, right? Like he doesn't necessarily want to go to jail for 10 years. He doesn't necessarily want to go to jail for 4 years, but he also doesn't necessarily want to risk the fact of going to jail for life and not having any possibility of helping his family. And then seeing Leo, you know, Isaac does such a wonderful job as Leo, because Leo has this, you know, this quality of wanting to do the right thing, but also willing to do the bad thing to accomplish the right thing. And I think he plays with that really, really well, especially in the conversations with Ben, you know, up to the point that like he's willing to go stand on a street corner, work a corner, and sell drugs and do whatever it takes in order to support the family and be in this gang, which of course provides the whole motivation for the crime. Jonathan Chase is ADA Barnes. What a son of a bitch. Wonderful performance. There's some really, really kind of slimy moments, you know, some interesting moments, and yet done in a way that never feels like mustache twirling villain, you know, bringing that phrase back. And
here's the thing. That. I think this is just a thing that popped into my head that occurred to me. You can play mustache twirling villain and lawyer. I will totally buy it. I'll buy it every
That's
time.
A fair point. Yeah. And then, of course, you know, one of the MVPs of the episode, Deandra Lyle, who plays Vicky, is superb. And the relationship between her and Ben/Elena is so beautiful, and ends up, you know, being like this episode has like multiple emotional spines, honestly, and this is certainly one of them. Their relationship is fantastic. There are multiple scenes between the two of them that are so lovely, and you know, one of the things that I can't help but mention for another time, you'll hear it again later in the interviews, and I apologize for repeating myself, is that the final scene that they share together before Ben goes to give his summation in court, it is a reminder of the fact that our Leaper connects with the people around him. There is never any sort of wall. I feel like, you know, sometimes in the classic series, Sam would put up a little bit of a wall. You know, he would put up a little bit of a barrier between fully connecting with the people around him, because, you know, and this is not, I'm not criticizing that. This is just something that I noticed about the original series. And part of that played into his uncomfortability, I think, with being in these very intimate, emotional situations and being vulnerable around these people who are being so vulnerable around him. And it makes perfect sense. That is, again, it's not a critique, but the thing that's so lovely and sets this show apart in some ways is that Ben doesn't do that. Ben allows himself to be incredibly vulnerable with these people. He connects with them, and as you'll hear later, that's not just Ben. That's just Raymond, the actor. You know, that's just and it's lovely, and the way they connect, it was just such an emotional moment. It was really, really beautiful, and you kind of felt like there was this idea that he was doing it as much for Vicky as he was for Elena. The idea that like Vicky needs to feel loved right now, basically, and feel like she is supporting and loving, you know, her person. And it was just beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah. I think, like, to that point, like, I think that's the difference between quantum entanglement leaping and body leaping from the classic series. Is like, one, you kind of got a little bit of Elena left behind in Ben, and that could explain a part of it. But two, also, and this is the thing that even as a kid, it always bugged me about the classic series, and I thought it was a little it just totally took me out of the show because I just thought it was like too precious. And again, I thought this even as like an 11, 12, 13-year-old, like whenever Sam couldn't say I love you to someone because he didn't actually love them, to me it's like, oh, just for the love, just
just say it.
just say it, just to embrace the fact that you are in this person, literally you are in their shoes, you are in their persona, their aura. Just say the thing, because that you have no problem making out with women, making out with people, Sam. You have no problem with that. Damn it, just say I love you. Just say the thing that they need to hear. That's all I'm saying. And yes, to your point, I think how Ben and how Raymond, like, how embraces that, and he is fully there with them. Absolutely love that.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting that too. That's a wonderful example. Other things I love about this episode, Jen entering the chamber, obviously. That's awesome. We learned that she has a law degree, that she earned it while she was in jail. You know, I love, there's a wonderful line. What did you think? She was going to, you know, sit her out of jail and do nothing? And that's true. It's like, I totally buy it. You know, this isn't like a, oh, Al can do everything sort of moment. This is just sort of like, yeah, that's exactly what Jen would do. I totally buy that. So she can help and support Ben in a way that Addison won't be able to for this leap. And it's wonderful because it's Addison's call, right? Like, Addison is the one that recognizes early on in the leap. She's like, you know what? I might not be able to help you, but I know someone who can. And of course, Jen doesn't want to do it, but ends up doing it and doing it very well. And I think learning a lot about herself along the way, which makes the episode even stronger. This isn't just a gimmick. This isn't just a, hey, let's put somebody else in the chamber and see what happens. This is, there's a point, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. There are so many wonderful character moments out of that. Like the bunny monologue, Jen being touched at the end, like, you know, when she sees like how the fate of all the characters and how it turns out, and them joining the Innocent Project and realizing that, like, she is a part of this project and that she can make a difference. Absolutely loved all of that. I don't want to ruin it because it's such a funny story in the interview with Nanrisa. There is a bit that accidentally gets created because of Nanrisa's clumsiness with a particular prop in the episode, and I didn't say this in the interview because we had some technical issues because there was some lag.
There was a bit of lag, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like I don't want to interject because I know it's going to create a delay, but I almost wish that they actually made that a bit in the episode, like a physical bit. But I know that wasn't part of it. But anyway, that being said, this is not a criticism of this show. It's just something that I enjoyed and that I miss about the old show. Is that I like in the old show, there was kind of this mystique around the imaging chamber and the relationship between Sam and Al, and not just anybody can step into the imaging chamber, or if you do, it takes a lot of juice and it takes a lot of, like special power juice. It's late at night. I'm losing my words. It's after 10. Anyway, but you can't just have someone else step into the imaging chamber. Like, you got to do some stuff to make that happen.
Right.
I do kind of miss that.
Sure.
About the old series. But that being said, I think, like, the fact that you can get someone else into the imaging chamber and have this bit, it's lovely. All worth it just for the sports almanac bit.
Yes. Oh, so, you know, Jen obviously brings just a wonderful different kind of energy to the observer role, and some of the stuff that she says, like she says a lot about sleeping with the enemy when we see Vicky, because I did mention this earlier, but Vicky, of course, works for the district attorney's office in the second chair in this particular case, she's like, oh, sleeping with the enemy. She has this other bit, of course, it's like, oh, we've got Marty McFly's sports almanac. It's like, what are you talking about? And that's the way that they end up raising the money for Tyler's bail, because you find out if Tyler goes into jail at Rikers, he's going to be paralyzed. And it's a wonderful moment, and there's definitely like some question about like, was this the right thing to do? And I'm not going to say anything more about it, but you will hear in the interview with Romy about some sort of behind the scenes and deleted scenes sort of stuff that plays in wonderfully with that, which is cool. yeah, the bunny speech, which is obviously something that we talk about in both the interviews, so I'm not going to belabor the point, is hilarious and also touching. The way that she is able to still motivate Ben, without being Addison. It's a wonderful reminder, I think, of the relationship and the closeness of all of these people, and also a wonderful reminder that Ben is indeed like a hero. Like Ben, he needs a little support, he needs a little push from time to time, especially after all of these leaps, right? And he's working so hard, but at the end of the day, like, he's going to do the right thing, because as he says earlier in the episode, it matters to me. These people matter to him, and he doesn't know them, right? He doesn't know any of these people, but they matter to him, and that is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At one point in the episode, when it turns out like the kid, the one who's being prosecuted, forgive me, blanking on his name, Camilo, when Camilo is urged to take the 4-year deal, and we find out, like, if he takes this deal, like, the family ends up being okay,
better off, right?
Better off, yeah. And I really thought, like, oh, they're gonna go a little complicated, they're a little sticky, and they're gonna actually like take the 4-year deal, and they're gonna make like a little commentary, is that for some people it's not fair, it's not just, but you have to do it.
Yeah.
And so that would have, like, I'm not saying that would have been a better choice or a worse choice. I'm just saying, like, for about 15 seconds, I thought that that's where they were going to go. And I thought that would have been an interesting choice.
Sure. I love the fact that Jen just flat out says, take the deal and you'll leap. And Ben actively says, that's not good enough. That's not what we're going to do. And it's amazing, and he's got the wonderful, he imparts hope to Camilo, right? Like, he's like, that's what this is about, like having hope, and the way that he explains hope is wonderfully done. It's heartbreaking because the episode serves as a wonderful commentary on the American judicial system and the way that we punish criminals, and the failures of that system. And this is an episode that takes place 38 years ago. And let's just be honest, in 38 years, not a whole hell of a lot has changed. The arguments that take place over things like, cash bail or, it is still an issue. Mass incarceration is a problem. And, the fact that we see, I mean, if not daily, at least weekly, you can find a report of someone being exonerated for a crime they didn't commit 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, people in prison for decades of their life for crimes they did not commit. And I think that this episode does a wonderful job of telling a story that takes place in the confines of that system, that broken system, while presenting you, just telling you a story, right? Like, without being, to borrow Romy's words that you'll hear later, without being dogmatic about it. And that is also one of the reasons why the episode is so successful.
Absolutely.
Also love the fact that Ben leaps before the verdict is read.
Yeah.
Thought that was cool.
I love that. It's a thing. It's like, as soon as they saw it happen, it's like, yes, of course, because we're kind of following this tradition in the show, like very much like Let Them Play, where, like we're letting the leapy have the moment.
Yeah. Elena gets to win the case, right?
Yes. I mean, the leapy gets the moment. And also, I think it's, I've kind of given shit to the writers before about trusting the audience more. And I realized, like, this is a case where they do trust the audience more. Like, you don't need to see that resolution. You know what's going to happen.
Right.
And that is enough. And you can just, like, get on to the next thing, which the next episode, definitely shades of shock theater.
Abso-freaking-lutely.
Yeah.
Even the like the lightning, and thunder crash outside the window at the very end, it was just sort of like, oh, that is, that evokes shock theater all the way. Yeah, it's look, it's gonna be a good one. There's some really fucking good stuff coming your way.
There's some good stuff. So we've seen some sides from this next episode. And without tipping too much, like a question that I have seen asked more than once on social media.
Yes.
And recently,
a
question is going to be answered.
Yeah.
In regard to a connection
Stop.
to the in regard to connection to the classic series.
Yeah.
So yes, I think
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
One thing that I want to go back just briefly on, because we've obviously, of course, naturally gone way longer than we anticipated, is I wanted to mention. I know. I wanted to mention something else I loved about the episode is that Jen steps out of the chamber before Ben gives the summation. Jen has helped him all through this, so that Addison is in the courtroom while Ben gives the closing remarks, and of course he speaks, to her, basically says, I would go to the end of time for the person I love, to help illustrate the fact that Camilo has done this thing, out of, not done this thing rather, out of love, like, right. Like to just, picture the lengths that you would go. And I just love that she was there for that. One other thing that's incredibly important, and it's something you'll hear a little bit more about in the interview with Romy, is that Ben and Addison say, I love you to one another. And this is the first time they've said that to one another since like the fourth or fifth episode, I think. So, yeah, it's been quite a while since they said those words to one another. And it's interesting. I think the way that you can kind of read that moment, I think it can have multiple interpretations. So I'll be interested to know what other people think of it. And I'll be interested to know what people think too of Romy's comments about it, because Romy, is pretty clear about kind of what her intent was with that moment later on, which is cool.
I will say that took me by surprise, because like I said, I was feeling like fellow travelers paging Dr. Song, that we were seeing like a little bit of a pull away from Addison in regard to Ben. So I was pleasantly surprised with that, but I also know we only have 3 episodes left. So I'm curious to see what they are setting up there.
Yeah. Look, in closing, I will just say I thought the episode had so many really just wonderfully, earned moments. Again, within the episode itself, in the context of the larger picture, double that, so many wonderfully earned moments. The seeing Ben interact with someone that's not Addison, seeing Ben remember magic, seeing the interplay between the headquarters team and the bets that are floating around between who Ben's going to remember first, or this or that sort of stuff. Also, of course, begs the question of like, is Jen okay? Is Jen okay here doing a little gambling? Like, is that all right for her? Because it's clearly, her father is an addict. So, but yeah, just some wonderful stuff overall. And we're not going to talk too much about it because it's something that we talk, I think, pretty in depth about with both Romy and with Nanrisa. But the moment when Jen, gets to read off what happens in the new history now that Ben has successfully made these changes is just such a beautiful moment for the show, for the character of Jen. And I loved it, and for so many reasons. So I felt like that this was just, again, an incredibly successful episode of the series, and another among multiple high points for Quantum Leap season 1.
Absolutely. I would agree. Like SOS and these, what I love about them is that they're almost self-contained, and we've been in as much as I've given crap about Where's Janice the last 2 episodes. Like I say that with love. I posted some memes on Twitter and Facebook the other night. Like I do those with love. I do them jokingly. I would say, like, in particular, these last 2 episodes, like the Janice storyline would have stuck out like a sore thumb. Probably, if they ejected them in there. And so if I was to introduce someone to the new show later in this season, like SOS in this one, would probably be like 2 of the episodes that I would use to introduce them.
For sure. I agree with that. Also worth noting that Martinez is, of course, mentioned. Leaper X is at least mentioned in the episode. There is some follow up there. The fact that we don't see or hear from him, that there's not necessarily progress made on his whereabouts or about what is happening, why he's there. Again, I did not mind that at all. That because that's not what this story is about. And again, with 3 episodes left, obviously we're going to see Martinez very soon and learn everything we want to know, or probably almost everything we want to know about that character and their motivations very soon. So That's it, right? Just a great episode all around.
Hmm.
We hope people enjoyed it as much as we did, and we hope that you'll enjoy our conversations coming up. Um, Anything
Yeah,
else that you want to
we
add
didn't
before
clarify.
we?
No, yeah, we didn't clarify earlier. I wasn't able to be on for Romy, so that's all you. So we're gonna throw to Romy, have that wonderful interview. I get to listen as a fan. That's great. That's awesome. And then after that, we will Nanrisa, which I was able to be on, and yeah, wonderful time.
Yeah, absolutely. So enjoy the interview with Romy Loor, and immediately following that, enjoy the interview with Nanrisa Lee. Jen, Romy, of course, wrote the episode, her first episode of television that she's ever written. I mean, congrats. That's pretty awesome.
First episode,
Uh,
first interview, awesome,
I
fantastic.
know. I'm
Yeah,
still sort of like, oh wow, how about that? And of course, Nanrisa, thank you so much for joining us as well. But enjoy these interviews. We'll be back very, very briefly. We promise this time after this is over to wrap things up here before we get out and get ready for next week, which is sure to be quite the episode. So enjoy these comments from both Romy and Nanrisa, and we'll be right back. Romy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Sam. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. So thrilled to have you here. It's a pretty big occasion. Your first episode of television as a writer.
Yeah.
Ben Song for the Defense, and I loved it. I thought it was just such a fantastic episode of Quantum Leap. Really, encapsulated everything that I love about the show. Certainly encapsulated the 4 H's that Deborah Pratt has talked about: the hope,
Oh my goodness,
humor,
what are they?
hope, humor, heart, and history.
Oh, woohoo!
And
Great.
this was layered with so much stuff. So I'm really looking forward to digging in. But before we do that, what was your exposure to Quantum Leap like before coming onto the show?
So, I mean, I remember the original show. I'm sure as a child, I saw, an episode here and there. So I definitely knew the concept, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And, I kind of came onto the show with Dean because I was working for him at the time. So then I was very much up to date with the new show at where it was when I came on to write my episode. So yeah, it was quite actually a easy transition, So
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we've had the pleasure of having Dean on the show a couple of times. And he's great. He's fantastic. That said, I've got you here now. I know you've worked with him for like 10 years. So feel free to spill all the tea. Let me know everything he does that drives you crazy. No, in all seriousness, what's it been like, that process working with him? Because you obviously working with him for so long, I'm sure that there's a great rapport. You guys have kind of like a system in place, and just coming from working as his assistant to now writing this episode, what's that journey been like for you?
It has been the most educational journey in the business that I've had ever. And I have worked a lot of different areas. So I've been on the management side. I've worked on set for quite a few years. But my focus and my goal was always to kind of get in the writer's room. So, I had to make the decision of like, okay, I need to work for a showrunner. And Dean was the second showrunner I worked for. And it was kind of that perfect opportunity where Dean is a person who enjoys and loves seeing others learn and will foster that mentorship and growth. And it's just amazing. And, I have been with Dean for like 3 years. So I've seen different parts of the process, developing new shows, pitching shows, selling them around town. And then also like once you're in production. So they're all like very different skill sets for writers to learn. And so it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to learn each aspect of those.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, he's been incredibly kind and helpful, and even some of the conversations that I've been able to have with him, apart from the show, have been exactly what you said, educational. I've just learned so much, coming from strictly a theater background as an actor, like I've learned so much about television production and about writing, just in the brief conversations we've had. So I can only imagine what it's like to, to really like be in that with him. At what point did you know that you would be writing this episode?
Like a week before I joined the room to break it.
And we've talked, obviously we've spoken with a few other writers and again, in talking with Dean and stuff, it seems like sometimes the process is that, an episode might kind of get pitched and then it's kind of assigned to a writer. I'm curious, in this case, was this, was that the process here, or was this an idea that you kind of brought to the table and pitched yourself and got to go off and write?
Yeah, no, it was assigned to me. I don't think I ever would have had the confidence to go, hey, I want to do a legal drama as my first episode. It is not my wheelhouse. But I think, episode to episode, it's always a bit of a mixture. But the case of like the end of first season, we were kind of trying to look for stories that could also fit our budget. So we found these really great stages that are like legal courtrooms and stuff where we shot the episode, and I was just like, okay, we're starting with the set this time. Okay. So, before I even started writing the episode, I went and looked at the stages and kind of, okay, this is what we're working with. So it was a little bit of a, different process. But it was still great. It was so great. And we had some really great legal consultants that we worked with, which kind of saved me, because not only for my accent, I'm not from this country. So not only am I not great with legal necessarily, like in particular, the US legal system is incredibly foreign to me. So yeah.
To be fair, I think it's incredibly foreign to most people that live here, were born here. So I can imagine. One of the things that I love about the show, obviously, is that you get to do so many different kinds of stories and so many different kinds of things. This episode in particular felt like, I hesitate to say it this way because I don't want to imply that the show is getting stale in any way, shape, or form, but it felt like such a breath of fresh air in so many ways. Especially having Jen as the hologram for Ben for the bulk of the episode, which is fantastic. I'm so excited. We get to talk to Nanrisa tomorrow, and so I'm really looking forward to hearing her perspective on all that. But I'm curious as to where that thought came from to kind of like feature her as the hologram, and also when approaching this episode. When you look at it, do you think there are things that set it apart from what has come before thus far in the season?
It's hard for me to kind of look at it that way, because each episode is so different. It's like, let's compare apples and oranges. And it's just like, and like you just mentioned earlier, the 4 H's is like, that is kind of the core that carries us through from episode to episode, and then other than that, everything changes so much. So I was really happy with the balance of those 4 H's, which I now know. But I was like, I felt like it had a lot of heart, and it did. And I was able to get a lot of humor, which was really important to me, because like the pace and the humor of the story was like a legal drama and someone on trial for murder and going to go to prison for life. It is so heavy. And the bleakness of the public defense system, in particular at that time, is like incredibly heavy as well. And so I really wanted to find ways to find levity in that, in the chaos in that as well,
Well, one of the things that I found so fascinating too is that just from that historical perspective, it's 1985, we're in New York, and we're hearing, these stories, we're getting these snapshots of all of these different stories about what it means, not only to be existing kind of in this legal system, but just to kind of basically be existing as a human at that particular point in time. And I love the fact that we get this perspective you know, right off the bat, there's some humor, right, with Tyler in his case, and yet at the same time, we also see that there is kind of this prejudice against him just because he has, you know, these priors, and it cannot go unnoticed that he's a black man as well, and I love the way that the story continually layers in so many different facets of what was going on at the time, and certainly not only with the legal system, but even having, you know, a queer character, you know, being one of your main characters and have this relationship between these two women. There's this lovely line between, you know, Ben and Vicky about how you know, they have to basically hide who they are, you know, in public, and hide from reproachful looks. I think that was the exact line. And I just, you know, I mean, I love that they've created this kind of oasis for themselves in their apartment that they share together. And now, due to the leap, like, Ben has kind of, you know, screwed with that a little bit, unfortunately. And I'm just really curious about that particular aspect of the story, where that came from, you know, the decision to put as much focus on the relationship, while also, of course, having it further the plot a great deal too, due to, you know, Vicky working for the district attorney.
Yeah, I think that part of the story began with what would be a great like twist at the end of, you know, or what is it, the end of Act One? It's just like dating the, you know, the person on the opposite side. In terms of it being like a lesbian relationship, we weren't sure whether to go that direction at the beginning, because it's an important story, and this, you often want a certain amount of time in order to be able to service that story, and we were so limited, so we were hesitant about telling that story and having those elements in it if we couldn't service it properly. But in the end, it felt like we were able to get a balance. And what I love about doing that is it normalizes these relationships, because they're part of the world, right? When we're not so focused on them being like the controversial topic, right? You know, they're just part of the world. And in that, in doing that, you're encouraging like acceptance of that as well, you know?
Absolutely. No, I think that it, not only does it work for the story, right? Like, you know, you have to serve the story, like, but it works as that second part as well, as being to further that acceptance, which I thought it was so lovely. I thought it was a really nice touch. And again, it really added just another layer to the story, and it engaged me as a viewer on a different level, you know, because it's one thing to just have this legal drama where it's like, oh my gosh, is Ben going to be able to, you know, to save the day? But now I'm getting, you know, some of these really wonderful personal stories, which I enjoyed. You know, another aspect of that history that gets pulled in just such a touching manner is, you know, the biker Stuart needing his motorcycle, and you know, he drops it on Ben that the reason he needs it is because his uncle has passed from AIDS, and he wants to attend this charity ride that begins at the first International AIDS Conference, which took place in Atlanta in 1985. Where did that come from? Because that was beautiful. I mean, that was legitimately one of my favorite parts of the episode. I just was sort of like, I didn't see it coming, but clearly it's appropriate in 1985, you know, and cannot go unnoticed that we're in New York as well, and how important it is there. So where did that come from?
You know, I was with each of the characters that were, you know, going through something illegal, you know, dilemma in the story. I wanted to subvert, you know, expectations. So it's just like, you know, with Tyler, and then, you know, when you introduce Rose and seeing like she's the kind of Macbeth, do the bad thing, you know, and then again with Biker, you know, you're the immediacy of the stereotypes of like why a biker, you know, may need his bike back and whatever. It's like, it seems like such a non-important story. But let's make it like, let's find a reason to make it important, you know, and, you know, and it's just, I think so often, you know, like we almost do, we judge with first impressions, right? And so I always want to work against those and work against stereotypes, and which help to, you know, ask people and encourage people to look with an open mind and see things differently from a different perspective.
Absolutely.
You know, so
that's very humanizing, you know, and it's lovely. I think that that's a worthy goal for certain. So I want to talk more too about, you know, public defenders in the legal system, and I want to get to that a little bit later. Before we do that, just kind of drifting away from the history aspect, you know, Jen obviously is such a delight throughout the course of the episode. And it's funny because I've said this before on the podcast that, you know, for the first few episodes, I just felt like she was so ambiguous. I didn't know much about her, you know, and I thought that Nanrisa was fantastic, but I just didn't know who this character was because she didn't get a lot of screen time. And then we started to get more, and I was just sort of like, man, she's awesome, you know, like I love this character so much. And then, you know, the past few episodes we've kind of drifted a little bit away because there's been other stories that we're following, which is fine. But how cool was it to bring her back and like put her like at the center and have her as this hologram? Talk a little bit about the process about shaping those scenes and having her in the observer role.
So we, as a room, we'd all like discussed, you know, changing up the Leap hologram at some point. It wasn't quite decided when or how. So when we started breaking my episode, I was like, well, it's a legal drama that's not Caitlin's thing, but it could be Jen's, because we had already established we had, you know, a complicated past. She'd spent time in prison, you know, so it's like, well, you know, maybe there's something there. So, you know, I pitched it to Dean and Martin. I was like, what do you think about, you know, having Jen be the hologram this time? And, you know, we create it as like a good reason. We create a good reason for it based on like her history and her criminal history. And maybe she even studied law while she was, you know, in prison or awaiting trial or something, you know? And yeah, they were happy for it. And it was such a delight because I feel like it brought it was a new energy to the Leap. And I think, you know, I really enjoyed being able to do that, you know? Yeah,
it certainly was, you know, and it's amazing because we have been talking up, you know, Caitlin so much over the past few episodes. I just feel like the character of Addison has grown. I feel like Caitlin as an actor has just shown us stuff that, you know, has just been incredible. But that said, it was so different, and it was really wonderful, and opened up the show in kind of a new way, which I know you probably can't say. But is it possible that we might see that again, or that maybe we'll see somebody else in the imaging chamber for a while?
Anything is possible. That's what's so great about TV.
Right? Absolutely. Especially with this show, because literally anything is possible. I have to know, where did the bunny speech come from?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So, I mean, so part of the, you know, the arc of Jen's story in this episode is like, she's trying to be the Addison hologram, and she's trying to do it the way Addison does it. And so she, you know, and then by the end of it, she's like, she's just got to do it her way, you know, and when she starts doing it her way, like, suggesting they, you know, use Marty McFly's almanac and make a bet, you know, influence events. You know, she starts to have more success. But that speech, it began as I can't even remember what the other parable was. There was another parable we were using, and the starfish on the beach parable. Have you heard that one?
I haven't, no.
It's like, I'm going to misrepresent the story right now, so bear with me. But like a bunch of starfish wash up on the shore, and it's a girl or a boy is like throwing them back one by one. And an old man comes up to her and says, why are you doing that? Like, it's futile because you can't ever throw them all back. And I was just like, but it's the ones you can save. And that one, some in the room had thought they'd heard it before and heard it recently on another show. So it's like, find a new parable. And I'm like, okay. And it was like, oh. So yeah. So then I came up with I found the drowning babies parable. But I wanted to, you know, put some a humorous spin on it.
Sure.
So you know, they became drowning bunnies in the end. So
Wow.
Yeah.
It's I mean it's a standout moment for certain, and I think that it's one that we will certainly be talking about. The interplay between Raymond and Nanrisa in the episode, again, it's such a new dynamic and a new dimension. Can you talk a little bit about, like, just, you know, when you're writing for that, because at this point, you know, there's been a few episodes already, like, you've seen these actors work, you've seen, you know, when you're writing for these actors, I imagine, having seen their work, they make it fairly easy in some ways, but what are some of the challenges, and what are some of the things that just make you go like, ooh, I really want to give this, you know, to Raymond, or I really want to give this to, you know, to Ernie, or whatever the case might be?
So the two that, you know, were able to shine, you know, in this episode because of the stories they were given was Ray and Nanrisa. And it's always, Ray has fantastic comedic timing. You know, that just comes natural to him. And we see it and we know who can do it. And it's like, great, we've got him in heels, we've got him in a skirt, and he's going to go it, you know. And then, you know, we need to find the balance because, you know, there is a dramatic story being told. But then also it's just like, I wanted to get that moment where it's just like, I really want to see the depth, you know, I want to as well.
Yeah.
And we do, but I want to, like, in the moment where he gets to be in the courtroom and he gets to tell a heartful story, and he gets to pull these people in. And that's what I was, like, excited to do, because he hadn't had an opportunity to do it in that way before. So that was really good. And then Nanrisa, it's just giving her a huge arc and she's just, you know, I think out of all the characters, my humor is probably the most like Nanrisa's. Like, I'm very dry and can be very sarcastic. So it was just so much fun for me to be able to, you know, write that kind of dialogue for her, you know. So and she.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and one of the things too that I love, and it happens so perfectly in the bunny speech scene, is the way that they are able to play off of one another, you know, and just seeing Ray's reactions to this speech, you know, and seeing the way that Nanrisa is, like, you know, trying to get this out, because, you know, her heart is absolutely always in the right place, and we see that, but man, you know, sometimes it's just hard for her to really act on that. But speaking of her heart being in the right place, the episode ends in a really moving way, especially for the character of Jen. You know, we see her come back, and they're all standing around. They want to know what happened, you know, after the case is wrapped up. And I'm so sorry, I'm blanking now on the name of the brothers, the names of the brothers.
Camilo and Leo.
Yeah, Camilo and Leo. Thank you, Leo. Thank you. So when she looks up and she sees what's happened with the family, she's incredibly moved by this. And I look forward to being able to ask Nanrisa this as well. How much of that is on the page, and how much of that was just her, you know, being in the moment and reacting to kind of what was, you know, what she was given?
It was on the page, like, it was built to be an emotional moment, and Nanrisa and I chatted specifically about that moment before it was shot, because we wanted to do it the right way. And we, you know, and the way I described it, you know, when we were talking about it, is that this is a moment of catharsis for her, like, of all the time she spent in the legal system going through this and fighting for her own freedom, being back in the legal system and seeing the injustices of it, but winning out and being able to help others win out in that system was just really cathartic for her, you know. And at the beginning of the episode, she doesn't want to go in the chamber, and she says it's because she's not good at being the hologram and all that, you know, emotional support stuff, which is just a front for, I really don't think I'm ready to face that time in my life. I'm not interested in facing that time in my life, which you don't know there. But by the end, in retrospect, it's like, oh, okay, this was an experience that allowed her to move on from that negative, part of her life, and the terrifying part,
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things too that's kind of striking about the way that Jen kind of moves throughout this episode is that we've gotten moments before in prior episodes where she's really connected with Addison, or she's really connected with Ian, or obviously Magic. I think that the interplay that she's had with Magic in particular has been, it's just been something that it kind of is easy to revolve the story or certain beats of the story around their relationship, which is great. To see her with Ben, and then to also see, the other characters almost kind of revolving around her a bit, was really lovely. It doesn't, it's easy to notice that in that emotional moment, the person that's there for her is Ian, and that they are, that they're the one that gives her the embrace. Talk a little bit about why Ian. I mean, again, I think it was perfect. So it might seem like a silly question, but why Ian as kind of that emotional support in that moment?
You know what? I don't know. I don't. It just felt right in the moment, I think.
Yeah.
And I think because we also wanted to, Addison has a very close relationship with Magic as well, and is always, like all of them, relying on Magic for advice. And I think Addison would have sidebarred. And as we learned, they clearly did sidebar, because they bet that this would be a good, a good thing for Jen to do, and it would be good for her. And I was just like, but you think she'll get to crying? And so, it was like playing the comedy of it. So allowing Ian to be the emotional support allowed to tell that part of the story, and close it off that way.
No, I think that makes total sense. And again, I mean, it felt like a silly question in some ways, because it does make so much perfect sense that it's Ian. The bets, because that's something else. We get multiple bets throughout the course of the episode. Jen obviously encouraging Ben to make the bet for Tyler, so that Tyler doesn't go to Rikers and get paralyzed, and then of course the bet over whether or not Jen could do this, and then the bet whether or not Magic is the one that Ben remembers first. Where did those moments, because they're so playful, so wonderful, where did those come from?
So, it was just a little bit of an extra through line in Jen's background, as like her father was a gambler, and she's always, that's part of her history. And then one of her go-to solutions is, let's bet on the future, because we know the answer, and let's help these people, So I just wanted to bring that kind of theme and the playfulness of okay, is this going to happen, or is this going to happen, throughout the show and into HQ, which, I wanted to, again, because it's such a heavy themed episode, I wanted to find those moments of levity throughout. And even at HQ.
I mean, the humor throughout the episode works so well, and I love the frequency with which it occurs. It never overstays its welcome. I think that in some ways the episode almost ends up becoming the funniest episode, without that detracting from the fact that we've got some incredibly heavy, and touching moments in the episode as well. Speaking of course, the relationship between Camilo and Leo, and the fact that, Camilo's on trial for his life, and now, Ben has stepped in. One of my favorite moments of the episode is that by the time they kind of get things wrapped up, so that Camilo's going to have 4 years in prison if he takes this deal, and Jen is like, "You're done. You can leave. Just take the deal and it's over." It is, without a doubt, I think, one of the most exemplary moments of what Quantum Leap is, of what our hero is, what our leaper is, in this case Ben, but it's the same thing I think that Sam would have done, to say no. Talk a little bit about that turn, and in particular the moment to have Ben give one of his speeches without it feeling like he's giving one of his speeches, which I thought was lovely.
Which one? Which speech was that?
Right. When he talks specifically to Camillo after Jen, I believe, tells him that, hey, just take the deal and you're out of here.
It's the reason why I wanted to do that is because that is how the system in New York works, right? And I don't know about currently, but definitely back then it was like, this system that is so overloaded with cases, and the public defenders can't keep up with their cases, and and the district attorney is struggling to keep up with their cases, and so they make these deals to push things forward. And unfortunately, sometimes that means innocent people, plead guilty because they don't have the support in order to have a fair case and a fair trial. They don't have the resources. And so they kind of, again, with like the river analogy of the baby, it's just like they're just washed down there, they're caught up in this system that's like a river just rushing them down. And I really wanted to have that moment, because that feels like, it's such an honest moment of like so many people and that, end up pleading guilty because they don't see any other way out.
Yeah.
And it happens, and I really wanted to tell that. And then, it was hard. It was hard because you want to have the positive and you want to say fight. But again, it's like, just like ADA Barnes says, like, he'll take the deal. They always do. And that is the actual reality. It's this like, it's like some ridiculous number, like 98% of cases in New York are like plea deals.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I know.
So nobody's being given a fair trial. People are just taking what they can get. So it was important for me to have that moment when telling a story about a public defender.
Yeah. Well, one of the things too, and visually it worked so well. And so I don't know if this was something that was written in. I can imagine that it was based off of, everything else, but like having Ben have to cart around this huge case with him wherever he's going, which again provided moments of humor and levity, but also it was a literal manifestation of the weight that, that she, who he's lifted to, that she has to carry around everywhere she goes. The look on Addison's face when she realizes that there's like 138 or 180 cases in there, it's staggering. And my partner's uncle, like he was a public defender for a while, and he told me point blank, he's like, no, I mean, most of these cases never even went to trial. You just have to plea everything out. And he got out of it for that very reason, because he didn't, that wasn't something that he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that's in Chicago, which is obviously it was, very similar circumstances to New York, and would have been probably around the same era as when the episode is set. But anyway, the idea of hope, obviously that being one of the 4 H's, but specifically to this episode and specifically to that monologue that Ben has, there was something about the way it felt like it connected not only to this story, but to the fabric of the show itself, that I thought worked so well. And obviously part of that is I think Raymond just like nails it. Obviously it's beautiful. But kind of going off of what you were just saying about the realities of the legal system, having this character be an advocate in this specific case, but also just in general, this is kind of a nuts and bolts question, but when you're writing something like that, what's important to say, but maybe even further than that, what's important not to say?
When I'm writing
that
Ben's perspective, the public defender's perspective, it's important not to be dogmatic.
That's a great answer.
when you are, people stop listening. And again, another reason for the humor throughout, you know. And it's also important to talk from personal perspective, because when you're talking from, and for example, the last speech in court that Ben gives, I went through several iterations of it. I just couldn't quite figure out how to get it right. And, you know, it ended up being a speech about one brother's love and the things he does for his younger brother in order to provide a future for him. And that was just like, when I landed on that, I was like, that feels right, because it's when people talk about the most personal parts of themselves that others will more likely listen, as opposed to when you're telling others the way things should go.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to make it as personal as as possible.
Yeah.
And then also, for Ben. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It really felt twofold, because it's very personalized as with the brothers, and in particular, the effect that Camillo being gone is going to have on Leo, and on Abuela. Mm-hmm. And now the opportunity for, Ben to also use his circumstances with Addison, I mean, he literally says, I'd go to the end of time for
mm-hmm.
for the one I love. And so I think that, it was also really a fantastic moment to have Addison in the courtroom during that, mm-hmm. That they kind of, that Jen had already sort of handed off the reins of the leap to Addison and have her present for that. One of the things that we've started to notice, and it might not be anything at all, but it seems to be that for the past couple of episodes, there have been some moments between Ben and Addison that are starting to feel just a little maybe uncomfortable, a little awkward. Like there's a little bit of tension running underneath with the way that, they're playing some of the I love yous, or they're playing some of the, I can't wait to be home to you, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, like when you're writing that, you're writing I love you, and you're writing, I love you too. But as far as that subtext goes, how much of a factor is Ben being gone, as long the circumstances of him leaping out? Like, how much of that is starting to wear on Addison specifically at this point? If you can answer that question.
I don't know. I didn't necessarily read it that way. And it's interesting you talk about the subtext of the I love yous, because I don't think they've actually said I love you since episode 3 or 4.
Yeah. No, I think that's right.
It's, it's the first time it's happened in a while. And we actually talked about that moment, and I think we earned it, because this is the first time that she's stepping aside and saying, like, I'm not going to be here by your side. It's not the first time she wasn't in the chamber, obviously, because, she's been kicked out. But thanks to Janice. But it's the first time that she's consciously making a conscious decision of, I'm not going to be here while you are trying to survive.
Sure.
And
right.
And I think, Ben definitely felt that in the moment. But as to whether there's a strain, I don't know. I mean, I would, I think they're playing the normal, weight of, okay, we're now 15 leaps in and we're not sure of when this is going to end.
Right.
Well, Go ahead.
I feel like, in some ways I'm under the influence here, because my co-host Dennis, it's something that he feels pretty strongly about. I feel less strongly about. I think that one of the things is, I do think that there's definitely some weighted exchanges that have occurred between the two of them recently. And it just seems like, and Magic has a line in this episode that really, I think, shines light on the fact that, like, she's been doing this practically 24/7, for weeks, and she's tired. She wants him to come home. There's so much at play here and going on. So I was just kind of curious, yeah, from a writer's perspective, like you said, being 15 leaps in and writing these characters, and especially because, as you said, you're writing their relationship in a way that we haven't necessarily seen, for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
There obviously there's been flashes of it, of course. There's been some really lovely moments where they try to hold hands or whatever, but specifically having these exchanges, I'm just kind of curious about what goes into writing this relationship. And I suppose if there are, like, within the writer's room, if there's sort of any do's or don'ts for, writing these two characters together.
For writing them together. Oh, I don't think so. I mean, there's nothing that comes to mind specifically.
Yeah.
I think there are occasions where it's just like, oh, well, I mean, in this episode was an example, like we had to have the conversation, would they say, I love you? Because they haven't done that.
Ooh.
So it means so much. So, and also it's like, well, we decided that in this case, we think it would happen because this is the first time, as I said, that Addison's going to consciously step aside, and Ben is also feeling that,
Yeah.
So we felt like we earned it at that time.
Yeah, no, I that really does add a new perspective on the moment for me, because now I look at it not so much as there's any hesitation on Addison's part, so much as there is, I haven't heard that in so long, as it just kind of like it washes over her. Like it really does kind of, it really does add a little extra perspective to it. Because there's something lovely about, sometimes there's some ambiguity to some of the moments that I think occur throughout the season, and I love that because it for me as a viewer, like, it engages me in a way where I start thinking about things a little bit more than if it was all just spelled out for me. And just with the nature of their relationship, I think that there are some questions that are certainly beginning to develop kind of among the fandom about, how long can this go on? We know we're getting a second season, right? And I am of the mind that, all bets are off. You never know what's going to happen. For all we know, Ben might not even be the one leaping. Who knows? But that said, if he is, like, that's going to create further strain and what's going to happen, especially as we are at this point really just careening towards that finale. We've got 3 more episodes. So it's really interesting to hear about the way that their relationship is treated by, by the writers, by the actors, because we had the fortune of talking with Caitlin last week, and that's something, unfortunately, just due to the nature of SOS, we didn't get a chance to talk a ton about. We talked about it a little bit, but not a lot. So all that's just a way to say that I really do love having that added perspective. And I also love the way that the relationship was written, because much like O Ye of Little Faith, they're apart for most of the episode. Whereas normally, she's with him, almost the entire leap, which is something else that I really, really enjoy, because in the original series, there would often be stretches of those episodes where Al would not be around at all, like he would maybe be in like 3 scenes sometimes, whereas in this iteration it feels like Addison is present a lot more, which I enjoy. When it comes to the legal system, when we were talking earlier, one of the kind of like just final touches that I think it made me emotional, and I think it moved the character of Jen, obviously, is the fact that both of these lawyers go on to be a part of the Innocence Project. Talk a little bit about the idea of the effect that Ben's leaps have that go beyond the mission sometimes. And in this particular case, I think certainly puts these women exactly where they should be, as opposed to, where they would have ended up otherwise.
I think, as human beings, when we get set on a path, we quite often ride out that path without stepping outside of it and recalibrating and, confirming that we are on the right path, and I think human beings sometimes find themselves so far down a particular path, and and then it's just like, what am I doing here? And I think what Ben is able to do for both of them in this episode is catch them at a moment in their lives where they're not 20 years into this career of theirs. They're still at the beginning, and they're at a time where they can go, well, this isn't quite what I expected it to be. And so they're both able to shift their perspective and go, what do I want it to be? And how do I want to contribute? You know? And I think it's that, because if Ben wasn't there, Vicky would have taken out the page and, you know, listened to her boss and not thought about it, you know, because she's focused on, I'm going to be second chair in a couple of years because I'm helping people, you know, I'm doing a good job for the justice system, but all those little nuances along the way, those small choices that kind of inform your morality, sometimes get pushed aside when you're so focused on that goal ahead. And what Ben is able to do for them is to remind them of, like, let's look at the reason why you want to do the job that you do and your purpose in it, and allows them to kind of shift, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things too that's really lovely is the belief that they clearly have in one another. You know, we see it mostly from Vicky's perspective, but here's something that I absolutely love about, you know, this quantum leap, is that there are times in the original series, which of course, you know, I adore, and Scott Bakula is incredible, and the character of Sam is, like, you know, helped define my moral compass, no joke, you know. But that said, there are times when I think that he has difficulty connecting with the people that he is involved with on these leaps. Sometimes not. Sometimes he becomes very invested. I think time after time, we see Ben become very invested in the people that are around him. You know, I go back all the way back to Somebody Up There Likes Ben and the relationship with the brother. Like, that to me, like, he is willing to lay down on the train tracks for him. There's no doubt about that. And I think we see that again with Vicky. And it's like, he allows himself, it's almost like an actor, you know, he allows himself to just behave as truthfully in that moment as possible, as opposed to, well, I'm not really this person, this could be awkward, this is, and he really has that moment with Vicky, you know, when they reconcile and when Vicky gives him the pin. Obviously Raymond is an incredibly warm, you know, giving individual. We see that on a weekly basis. That said, when writing the character of Ben and creating these moments, how conscious of an effort is that to have him really live those moments with those characters, as opposed to having a little bit of distance because he's not really the person that they're talking to?
We always write him as completely investing in those characters, because that is the person that is the character, you know. It's like from the get-go, he's always thrown himself in, you know, willing to sacrifice himself. I mean, that's why he leaped, right? But speaking to what you said is like, yeah, it's hard to be that connected emotionally, you know, on each leap after leap. And that's kind of what I was trying to get to in that bunnies in the river speech. You know, it's kind of, that's his leap fatigue, you know. It's just like, he is trying so hard to do the right thing over and over and over, you know, and it is exhausting, you know. And so I think I tried to address that for him in that scene, you know, and ultimately you just got to trust, you know, that you're doing the right thing. And I think, you know, that's what Jen ends up reminding him of once she stumbles her way through that speech.
Well, speaking of, perfect, because I wanted to ask you about this. You know, she literally calls him a hero, and I think that it's funny because, to be completely frank, I feel like that is something that could be a little ham-fisted, right? You know, it's like you're calling your hero a hero. You're literally like labeling them, but it's so perfect. You know, it plays so well, and it really is just this encouraging, wonderful moment. Talk about the decision to literally write that line, to say that, like, you're a hero, you know, that's what makes you a hero. Because I loved it. And I feel like it's one of those things that could kind of almost be cringy, but it's not at all.
Well, I think it happened at a time where he needed to hear it the most, you know, where he didn't believe it.
Yeah.
He didn't see it. And so you know, that's where it's not, you know, it's just like he needed that.
Yeah.
you know, in order to
I
keep
well,
going.
I think there's something too about having Jen be the one that says it to him as well. That's
Yes.
like there's something really really cool about that. You know, I can't put my finger on.
Well, it's because she's so sarcastic and so like off the cuff. So when she actually says something like heartfelt, you know, she really means it.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, I think that makes that moment where she is overcome with emotion at helping to set things right just so
Mm-hmm.
genuine, so honest, and so earned. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's not something we've seen from her before. And by helping Elena and Vicky, and by helping Camilo and Leo, and see, like, Leo becomes a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
What goes here's oddly enough, I don't think this is a question that we've ever asked on the show before. But when you're crafting like the future histories of the people that Ben
Mm.
saves on the Leap, like what goes into that? What prompts you to say like Leo became a lawyer? That sort of thing.
It was basically reinforcing the theme of a period of time in your life, and we all have them, that changes us. That it is so traumatic, or is it so brilliant? It's so, it's just like Leo got his brother back, when he thought he was going to lose his brother in this time. And it is those times in our life that change us and influence the kind of person we want to be. And so I just wanted to tell that he decided to become a lawyer. And, and Magic's line to Jen when he says, I'm guessing spending time in that courtroom had an effect on him, is kind of, the double meaning of it is, because it had an effect on Jen. And now she is coming fully out the other side of, that experience of hers. So it's kind of, it was just carrying on that theme a little.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. We've seen some incredible moments of growth for all of our characters back at the project. I feel like, especially with Jen and Ian and Addison, most recently with SOS. The project and the way that it's been featured, it does not go unnoticed in SOS and now in Ben Song for the Defense. It seems like much more aligned with what's happening in the Leap. They're not necessarily trying to solve a mystery on their own. They've got things going on, of course. Like there's still talk about Leaper X. I owe you $1. But there's also this drive to like uncover the missing page, to help in any way they can, to have Ziggy read all the files. Talk a little bit more about the decision to align those goals more and have what's happening at the project reflect what's happening on the Leap, and really integrate those missions, because it is different, a lot different from what we saw, especially from the first like 5 or 6 episodes.
Yeah, it's always tough to find the right balance, because you don't want because the stories are completely split. They literally happen in different times, and because you have them bifurcated like that, you want to tie them together somehow, and it's we sometimes do it with themes, and we sometimes do it directly with procedural beats. It's an ongoing discussion and discovery on like how best to do it, because it's tough to always find the right pace and energy, but and so it's it makes it very easy when you're doing procedural stuff and they're helping directly with the case and it's a direct connection, but you don't want it just to be shoe leather. You want
Sure
to have emotional stories back at HQ as well. So it's like, and I think it ebbs and flows, and I think that is good in a way, because we're not always going to be, oh, they're just going to research and Ziggy's going to tell us an answer,
right.
Or it's not always, oh, well, this is going to be an emotional story that's secondary to what we really care about in the episode, and it's just like, because we do shift between the two, I think that kind of helps us, because it makes it a little more unexpected and we get to play a little more. And then we get to also use the HQ as we really need them. Sometimes we need magic, helping somebody on an emotional level back at HQ. And sometimes we just need like help with the case. So it's like
Sure.
I like that we can play and we can change it around, you know.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think that one of the things that having the project, you know, be a focal point at times is that we get, you know, these wonderful character beats for you know, everyone back at the project, and that's something that, you know, obviously we never really got with the original series, and getting the opportunity to, you know, learn about these characters has been some of my favorite stuff, honestly. And I think that it's almost, we've gotten to a point in the series where it's so hard to like have a favorite, you know, like early on it was easy to be like, oh, Ian's my favorite, like obviously, you know, and then it was like, well, maybe Jen's my favorite. Oh man, Addison is just like killing me this week. And it's like, God, Magic is so perfect. And and so I think that like mission accomplished, you know, for the show, for the writers, for the actors, is that I'm so invested in all of them now. And that's just an opportunity that, you know, we never got, I think, as fans of the original show. So it's really, really nice to have that. There are, of course, a few characters that we haven't necessarily seen a lot of. We heard a lot of one of them last week and saw a little bit of them. But we haven't seen Janice, and we haven't really seen a lot from Martinez. Did you want to include them in the story? Was there ever an opportunity to include them, or was it kind of hands off because they're coming later?
It was already set, like when we would use them. I would say. Yeah.
Did you?
And, you know, there was so much in my story already. It was, you know.
Sure.
You know, I had another couple of cases in there, like runners, and they're like, "You just need to cut this back." But like a third.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because when I first like I have to admit, most of our listeners know this, but I'm kind of playing a little bit of stack deck because I've read like some audition sites here and there, and you know, we've had some people tell us information at certain points. But I feel like at one point, one of the things that I had heard is that there were like multiple cases, almost like with paging Dr. Song, like he had multiple patients that he had to save or whatever. And so there was this, initially I was just sort of like, oh man, you know, is Ben gonna have like multiple cases? And he did, but really we only focus, you know, mostly on the one. Obviously Tyler's case gets a little bit of focus as well. And I want to wrap up soon because I want to be respectful of your time. But that said, this is the second time Marty McFly has been name checked at his mini weeks, which is lovely. But in this particular instance, and I love the reaction that Ben has to Jen, it's used for something that might be considered slightly unethical. What are your thoughts on that? To dig even a little bit deeper, like the ramifications of it on the time stream or whatever of doing, you know, having this action take place. And it's so Jen. I mean, it works perfectly. Was there ever any hesitation on your part to include that? So it's kind of like three questions in one about that, you know.
Never any hesitation on my part, but to you know, give you a bit more perspective. You know, quite often because of time restraints, you know, the scenes that end up getting cut first are the HQ ones, because they're the ones that often, you know, especially like the tops and tails of those HQ scenes. So what I believe didn't make the cut is a moment where, you know, Addison is there with Ian and Magic, and they're talking about the leap, and Magic asks how Jen is doing, and she was like, you know, Jen's doing great. They're in court right now. And then she turns to Magic and says, so how do you feel about placing bets in the past? And it's like, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. You know, and you know, and so it's, you know, and that's basically it. Like, you know, we're not going to comment.
Right. No, it was great. I think that, again, it was so illustrative of not only the interplay that Ben and Jen got to have, but also, of course, the sense of humor that the episode had. You know, if I had not been made aware ahead of time that this was your first episode of television, I never would have believed it, quite frankly, because it is so successful on so many levels, and I think it's going to be a favorite of a lot of people. So, you know, congratulations on that. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for joining us. But before I let you go, what's next? Are we gonna see more episodes from you next season?
Oh yeah, I start shooting my next episode next week.
Nice, that's awesome. Will that be episode 4 of season 2?
3.
3. Okay. All right. I wasn't quite sure
Mm.
where you all were. That's
Mm.
awesome. Well, good, excellent. I look forward to that one. And I cannot wait to see what the reaction is.
Yeah, well, and in true Quantum Leap style, it couldn't be more different from this one. So, and that is what is the biggest delight for me about writing on this show, is that every episode you do is just so vastly different. It just makes it so much fun, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's made it a heck of a lot of fun, obviously, as a viewer, to see this. And I love the fact that even though we're touching on so many of these genres, one of the things that often happened with the original series, and it's just the way that the original series operated, is you often felt like you were getting a pastiche of whatever was popular at the time. It was like, what's the movie that everybody loves right now? What's even the play that is popular on Broadway or whatever. And it would just kind of transpose that and put it in Quantum Leap. I feel like even though we get to genre hop, I never feel like I'm just sitting there watching like this, sort of this pastiche with a little bit of a Quantum Leap spin. The stories always feel very much, they feel told in a manner that has a lot of weight, a lot of gravity for these characters for this purpose, and I really love that.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So about Dean, thank you so much, Romy. It's been a pleasure. Congratulations again. I look forward to getting the chance to talk to you again in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Bye.
Nanrisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so very much for being here. We're really looking forward to chatting, not only about Ben Song for the Defense, but also just the show in general and getting to know a little bit about you. The first question that I've been kind of asking people that are working on the show is, what was your exposure level to Quantum Leap before the show came along, before the sequel show came along?
Yeah, I had seen the show. I mean, I used to watch it with my dad from time to time when I was younger. So I remembered the old show. I remembered Sam and Al and that dynamic. I remembered Al's cigar. I remembered some of the, what is it, the way like the doorway lights up when he like shows up. I remembered that.
Yeah.
It's weird what you remember, like, when you're a kid and the things that like leave an impression on you. But yeah, no, I had watched it some when I was young with my dad. So when I got the audition, I just remember being like, oh, okay, they're rebooting this, and just being really curious about it. Yeah.
What were your initial impressions when you did get the audition of, reading for Jen? And did you immediately sort of say like, yeah, that's for me, or was there, was there enough of the character there for you to kind of feel that way? Because I think my impression early on is that there wasn't a whole lot of Jen there. And when we finally did start to get more, it was just sort of like, oh yeah, this is the good stuff.
Yeah. I remember reading the breakdown for the character. So usually when you get an audition, and I know you guys know this, but when you get an audition, you get the sides, the scenes that they want you to report and or read for, and then also you get what they call a breakdown of the character, and sometimes that includes a really quick breakdown of the show. So the breakdown of the character, I just remember it said, I think, Jen, 20s, head of security. She's a hacker for the team and is quirky yet formidable. And I just remember thinking like, because when I hear the word quirky, I just always sort of immediately think sort of like nerdy and wide-eyed, I guess. And maybe that's just me not being like super creative, but just sort of the archetype of the general archetype of something like that, to me, just feeling maybe a little bit more naive or something like that. And I read the sides and thought, yeah, I can see like that maybe that's kind of what they're looking for, and played around with it a little bit, with some ideas in that direction. But I really just kind of realized like that's not really my forte. Like I think, right? Like my vibe is not. I mean, yeah, I can be a little wide-eyed or whatever, but I'm kind of just a little. Just not that those aren't the descriptors I would necessarily like, quirky at least, like start with if I were describing myself, at least the way that I thought about it. So I just kind of thought, and as you have to do, I think a lot of times when you are auditioning, you make a choice whether you want to lean towards what you think they're looking for and try to sort of fit that mold, or if what you don't naturally bring to the table, if what you naturally bring to the table doesn't quite match that, then you can also make a choice to sort of just lean towards and show them what that character would look like through your lens, through somebody like you, and what you do have to bring to the table. So so I went with the latter, just because I felt like, yeah, I could kind of like do a little bit of a kind of like a wide-eyed in awe kind of thing, and I don't even know that that's what they were looking for, but I just thought next to somebody who that's their zero, there's so many amazing actors out there. If somebody naturally brings that kind of feeling to the table, like I got no chance, and so I kind of just worked it, in a way that made sense for me, that felt more grounded for me. My initial audition, I wore like a full on like Adidas tracksuit, and like my hair in a ponytail, not a lot of makeup, a couple I was drinking a beer, I was kind of sitting back like this and just kind of like, I don't know, whatever. I don't know what you want from me, a little bit like no, I thought, well, it just depends, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
I love that.
I'm curious. So you had the unique opportunity, like you shot the pilot, you got picked up, but then you had to shoot the pilot again. And like from what we were able to see, like from the pilot script, it was like you basically got to shoot the same scenes over again for the new pilot. They were just kind of restructured in a way. So was there anything that you learned about your character in that shooting in the few weeks? Like, oh, like I tried this last time, I'm gonna try this next time.
Not a ton for me, because in the first pilot, my involvement was pretty limited. I think I had like 2 scenes maybe that I was a part of, and one very little had changed in that actual dialogue. I think they maybe just changed the location of it. And then the other one, I think that scene got completely restructured. And I didn't have a ton of involvement in that scene. So in the original pilot, it was, I auditioned with what they call dummy sides. There's sides that aren't included in the pilot, but maybe you have less involvement initially, right? If you're not like Ray or Caitlin's character or something, right? They're probably gonna pull, unless it's like for secrecy or whatever. But for somebody like my character, where there wasn't a whole lot for Jen in that first pilot, they went ahead and gave me dummy sides too, just to show a little more of who you are in that character. So I had a pretty strong point of view about that. And then there were just a little bit more opportunity to kind of show that in the repilot. My character, there was actually a lot more representation in the repilot, just in terms of like screen time and just sort of being there. But I think, whenever unless you're maybe working a limited series where you get the whole arc of like the character kind of all in one go, like you never really know. There's like kind of only so much you can control, and I think that's why we work on a professional level, is because it's collaborative and you learn to be sort of pliable within that. So I think I did make some discoveries. There were a couple scenes to where I think there was one that didn't actually end up in the repilot, but we shot it. It was in the script, that sort of enlightened me a little bit more about specific things with Jen. How she might try to make somebody feel better, or, you know, where she is in her point of view in terms of like processing the importance of her experience with something versus somebody else's. You know, it was a scene with Addison, between Jen and Addison, and that sort of, though it didn't end up in the final cut, it did help me sort of find some rhythm in her humor, and also just give me a little bit more point of view about her relationship with Addison and past experiences with Ben and being on the team and stuff. So, I mean, that part was fun.
Awesome. So this is something that Sam and I have speculated a lot about, especially when we talked about the first aired episode. And I wouldn't have asked this question earlier, but like, you're already filming season 2 right now. So I feel like this is a more comfortable question to ask. Can you speak to a little bit, like, was it scary on the set and among the cast? Like, you shoot the pilot, you get picked up, awesome, and then NBC comes back and says they want a new first episode. Like, what were the conversations among the cast like? What was the attitude?
Yeah, I think like it's not. It feels like a pretty uncommon experience. I had never been a part of anything like that before. This was my first series, so also like maybe that did happen, and I just don't. You know, I'm like kind of a newbie on the lot, so maybe. But I think. As the season goes on and we feel strongly with our characters, and you develop your working relationships with each other, but also with, you know, the showrunners and with writers and stuff, I think you can have these conversations about your opinions and your character's involvement in the show. But in the beginning, I think, like, honestly, like a lot of that stuff, I think part of my impression is like part of what makes a showrunner do a good job, at least with their interaction with their cast, is it feels like, you know, they're kind of like the parents. Like, they shield you from any of the bad stuff and make you feel good and confident so that you can go out and do the good stuff. So while, yeah, there was definitely a bit of chatter amongst the cast, I mean, I think it was, you know, nobody really had an answer to anything, because it was NBC was waiting to see, like, you know, how much they liked the new pilot, and not waiting, but it was based on their opinion, and
sure.
I don't have a personal relationship with the executives at NBC, but we were shielded, you know, from any kind of from most of the if there was any unpleasantness, you know, by the people who were running the show. So there was a little bit of kind of moving around in the beginning. So that was an adjustment, I think. You know, the original showrunners stepped down, and then Martin came in, and he was already a part of the show, but stepped down. And so that was like, you know, a little bit of an adjustment. But I think, again, at the beginning, when there are so many, when everybody's just trying to find a rhythm and trying to work things out, you just, I think luckily we were just so busy. We just didn't have a lot of time to like about stuff, because we were like making a TV show, you know, and
right.
You know, we always say, like, there's so many different versions, right? There's like there's what gets written is one thing, and then it's like what gets shot, and that this is maybe a little bit more for movies, but then what gets edited, you know, those things can all drastically change in between each step, and so you really don't know until you see the edited version anyway. So
sure.
Right. It's fascinating to me, because I think that one of the things that we've kind of learned, because, you know, working in theater and doing like a couple of like low budget films here, there, whatever, is completely different from working like, you know, on a major motion picture, or working, you know, on a television series for a network. And some of the stuff that we've learned about that production, it fascinates me, is the fact that in television, especially with a network show like this, and you're on such a limited schedule, that sometimes the choices that an editor might have are vastly limited compared to the choices that an editor like on a film might have, you know, where they might have so many different takes of something, where, you know, whereas here it's like they've got fewer takes to work with, which is always interesting to me, considering how well the show I feel like is edited and paced, and that, you know, the quality of the performances is pretty incredible. I don't have a question there. It's just just something that I've kind of like observed and sort of picked up on.
Yeah,
at what point do you think you
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
please.
That was a bit of a lag. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Very old, and I think like anytime I try to do something like this, apologies in advance. I think I have a little bit of a lag from you guys, but I was just going to jump onto that and say,
no worries.
that, like, and to sort of further, you know, the further difference between network TV and a film, let's say, right, is that like a film, it's just sort of encapsulated. It's one thing that there's one director, or unless they're directing something, you know, and usually the director is the one that has like the full vision, right? TV, it's the showrunner and has, you know, is sort of guiding the ship, and we'll have different directors each episode. So it's more once that gets established, right, that the directors, or if you have a new writer or something, is sort of tasked with keeping the continuity of the show. And we're all there too. But I think, so yes, you may or may not have fewer takes. But I think the more like sort of, you know, you fall into a rhythm in a show, in a network show, and you know sort of your tone and your relationships and what your strengths are with, you know, let's say between Jen and Ian, you know, or Jen and Magic, and even just little things, how you sort of like to maybe you might want to switch something up or whatever in terms of like how you would normally, you know, handle something within a scene with, let's say like Jen's relationship to Magic, you know, you might want to show a slightly different facet. And so that's when you can have a lot of fun in between. Having said that, I think because we have such a strong writing staff, I think that's become like pretty apparent, that is really, really understands like the dynamic between our characters. Now it's like you get these, it's great. You know, in the beginning, again, everybody's sort of feeling everybody out. We don't really know yet. We're still sort of fleshing out those dynamics. And, you know, even if you have a strong point of view about it in your head, doing that with Ernie Hudson in real life, you know, it's not, you know, like, I've never been in a room with Ernie before we started shooting, you know, it's a collaborative and it's a vibe thing. And so you start to see sort of what comes out of that. And I think, you know, with a lot of credit to the writers, I think they started to see some of those things pretty early on. And now you'll pick up a script and you'll get it and you'll read it and you'll be like, yep. Like, that's a new fun thing that like acknowledges this other thing you did, and it just continues to build. So it's gotten really fun in that sense.
Well, you created an even more perfect segue for the question I wanted to ask. So thank you for that. Because I'm curious as to maybe when you felt like the writers got Jen and when you like really got Jen, or, you know, if the moment was the same moment, maybe, you know, at what point did you just sort of feel like, yeah, now this feels right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll be honest. I think like in the, I had a little bit, it was a little tricky for me in the beginning because I think I had such a strong point of view about who I thought Jen was when I booked the role. But I think, you know, as more, you know, at that time, it's just me. I had full control over that character and my perception and how I wanted to sort of like portray that character. When you start adding, right, a whole room full of writers and executives and studio and even things like hair, makeup, wardrobe team, you know, who are all amazing professionals in their own, you know, in their fields. Again, it becomes a collaboration, and you want to listen to, you're shooting yourself in the foot if you don't want to listen to what these other, you know, top tier professionals like can bring to the table, their ideas, you know, and how that could just help your character. So in the beginning, it was I mean, that was a little bit of a difficult adjustment for me. And I think, maybe that speaks a little to my greenness, or maybe that speaks a little bit to my stubbornness or protectiveness over the character that I had at the time. And I think like, for me personally, and as working actor, it was a really good thing to sort of move through, to be able to like, hear and incorporate other people's ideas into this character to help sort of like point it in the direction of the kind of show that we are. And so in the beginning, it was a bit tricky. And I think, because the network ordered a repilot, it can be easy to sort of get in your head about like, well, did they not like this? Like, did they not like that? Did they want to see something different? And, there may or may not be notes that are attached to some of those things, but they get sort of, given sort of down the line, we don't hear them necessarily directly, and we hear them from the people that we need to hear them from. But if you get to be a little bit careful, because you don't want to get, and I can speak from experience, because I feel like it did sort of get a bit in my head about just worrying a little too much about what I was doing was the right thing, and questioning. And I think, when you have somebody like Martin or Dean, who's, sort of like navigating things at the top, like, they're so trusting of things that, like, I had a conversation with Martin early on, and he was like, "You're doing great. Like, just do what you want to do, like, and you'll be fine. Just keep doing what you want to do, And so, and I think that helped a lot. But I think honestly, if I'm honest about it, that will probably always be a little bit of like a thorn in my side for the rest of my career, any character I play, because, and that's just like I think a confidence thing, because I think like, when you work in these characters and in roles, like you could say, there's always like a coulda, shoulda, woulda. And maybe on the other side, it seems like it might have been a better idea to make a different choice, or to do that in that moment. Or if I had just like, played this a little differently, like, oh, I think it would have been better, but you never know, because like you didn't, that's not what you did. You can't go back and check, right? Like, at least not like in my world, like on the show, we can't
right.
Like you can't go back and really you wouldn't even know if something was a better option or not. So sorry, I'm going into this whole huge thing, and it probably sounds like I'm like, oh, I don't know that I made the right decision. But my point is that I did, because I'm so happy with the show. I'm so happy with who Jen is, I'm so happy with Jen's relationships with the people that, are around her. And so I think, and for a while I was a little bit worried, just questioning myself and if I was doing the right thing. But, but I think overall this whole experience, like boiling it down to sort of oversimplified terms, I think at the root of it, for me personally, my personal experience is really, this is about learning how to trust myself more, building confidence in my own creativity, and giving myself space to make choices and try new things and be curious about what's out there, and to like not execute everything perfectly, because like, what even is that? Because it's subjective. And if you are worried about that, you're just going to hem yourself in. You're going to be too scared to take big swings and try new things and discover new things about yourself, your character, your creativity.
I love that. I mean, I think that that's such a wonderful answer. It's very relatable, because I think that regardless of what field you're in, there are times when you have that question, I mean, I can relate to it fairly directly, because as an actor, especially on like a long run of a show, you might be like, 6 weeks into a show, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, what have I been doing? Like, I am so, it's like, this is not the right choice. So I mean, I totally get that. And it's the thing that's kind of fascinating to me as an observer is looking at your work on the show and knowing in those early episodes, that Jen was kind of like, the cop, right? Like that was just kind of the function that Jen served. And it wasn't really until we got a few episodes in when all of a sudden we started to really expand on the character and learn more about her. And, I can remember remarking on the podcast, even being like, I love Jen. Like, I just love seeing this character grow. I'm loving, learning more about her. I'm loving Nanrisa's work. And so I think that it's just been really cool to see that progression. And that's something that, like you were saying earlier, like with a film, you don't get. I mean, you get in a different way, right? Because you're with a character for a couple of hours or whatever. But when you get the opportunity to see this growth over the course of like a season of television or whatever, it's remarkable and it's so much fun. You talked about Ernie earlier, and obviously early on in the show, I feel like, some of my favorite scenes, in particular, some of my favorite project scenes are the scenes between Jen and Magic. Can you talk a bit about the relationship between the characters and kind of how you see it, and just, what it's like working with Ernie in general in those, in those scenes?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, working with Ernie is a freaking dream. He's the best. We've always gotten along, and I think, like, even before, I remember originally, like, we shot the first pilot in Vancouver, and he was the last one to come out, and so we had him via Zoom on like on a early rehearsal or something like that. And I just remember just being a little bit all over him, and everybody was a little like, oh, God, and I was just like, "Hi, Ernie, when are you coming?" Like, and then already going to like reach onto this man and like force a relationship, and so I was just, I remember,
Yeah.
I'll be out Wednesday, and I was like, I look forward to stalking you Wednesday. I love you. He was just like, sure.
We're totally gonna make these into GIFs.
Yeah.
So we're totally gonna make these into GIFs later. Yeah.
But please do. I mean, I feel like I'm such a goober. But it's great working with him. I think that he's had such an amazing career that has spanned decades. He's kind of hit the ground running in his career and kind of never really left. So he's a great person to bounce a lot of things off of, like, especially for me, again, this is my first show, it's my first series regular, asking him like practical things, practical business things, practical things about like, but also like, more nuanced things that are harder to, like, that you need on the job training for, learning how to like navigate, like when to pick your battles, like when you should pipe up over like what's important for you personally or the character, or even just like, what's going to make your job easier or harder, just certain things, right? Like Ernie's amazing with stuff like that. And I think Ernie and I, again, like we hit it off quite early. And because we had fewer shooting days when we were in Vancouver, Ernie and I just, went to dinner a lot. We had a lot of steak. Ernie was naked veggie bender, because and so we definitely split a couple tomahawks and it had some spinach, and but it was a great way to get to know him just on a personal level. And I think the discussions we had about our characters, it felt like he was very open to a lot of the things that I was really excited about Jen's relationship to Magic. In the dummy sides that I originally auditioned with, it had mentioned that that Magic had showed up, and sort of Jen had gotten herself in a little bit of hot water and didn't know him, and he showed up, and that's sort of how they met, and because of, there was a mention of Jen's relationship to her father, and how maybe it wasn't. And his addiction issues with gambling, and I just thought, well, God, that means that creates such an unsafe space for somebody at a young age, when you feel like you don't have security. If you have one parent that is that has a gambling addiction, and you don't know if they're gambling away the house, the car, your college money, just how that would affect somebody from a really young age, and how when, you know, that woman is armed with a big brain and a lot of chutzpah, you know, that step into the world and parlay that in a certain way. And I think that stuff was included. So I thought a lot about that initially, and how, you know, what would happen between when she got caught hacking something and now on the team, and what would be the things that would be important to her in terms of where's her loyalty? What is the thing? What is it about the program that keeps her there? Is it the money? Is it working for like a government thing? Is it like the excitement of like the project that you're working on? And I think for me, it came down, because it's not the money, you know, because Jen's a hacker. Go in and just do what she does. And she was doing that before she met magic, you know. But I do think it's about sort of having a surrogate father, a place that feels a bit safer, someone who's very consistent and has made it very clear that there is that if I kind of stick with him, there's a stability there, you know, and certainly love there, and respect for who I am as a person, and not necessarily trying to change that, you know. And so I think a lot of those elements went into the character. And you know, lucky for me, Ernie was like very open and loved all those ideas. And then and because of the time we spent together in Vancouver, we got to kind of just get to know each other's little sort of isms, and, you know, again, a lot of long dinners, a lot of long conversations, and just got to hang out and really start to build some of that trust in real life, and some of that intimacy, you know, into sort of like our vulnerabilities, what we thought about things.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about the relationship is that obviously there is that paternal quality that Magic has for Jen, and yet I don't feel like it's necessarily Jen just substituting, you know, this guy for a new dad or whatever. You know, I think that there's even more to the depth of the relationship, which comes across in some really wonderful ways. But speaking of Jen's real father, you know, there is in Stand By Ben, I believe, there's the moment where, you know, he's reaching out, he's trying to connect. Jen does not want to have anything to do with, or no, it's Oh Ye of Little Faith, excuse me. And then of course you and Magic are trapped on the elevator, and, you know, Magic kind of prods you and pushes you to reconnect with him. And it's funny because at the time, you know, watching the episode, I was just sort of like, no, Magic, don't know. That is not okay. Like, if she's drawn this boundary, she should hold that boundary. So I'm really curious as to what you thought of it. And I think that that's not me like criticizing the show in any way. I think it's really great, and I want to see where it's going. That's just me kind of like having, you know, feelings in this engagement with the moment. So I'm curious as to what your feelings were on that kind of, you know, Magic pushing her to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, firstly, I think it's great that you had that reaction, because then it tells me that you're invested in the characters, and that you care, and you have, not everybody's going to have the same opinions about how they want certain things to go in the show. And I think that, like,
right,
when you have a reaction like that, it just means that you're actually like really engaged, and you're like, that's not how I would do it. I don't think you should talk to her that way. You know, it's like,
exactly. Yeah. Yep. Don't you tell her that.
So I love hearing that. It was Stand By Ben, I think. Oh Ye of Little Faith, right, was the
okay.
Halloween episode, and that was yeah. So you had
yes, right. That was when you and Addison. Yes. Yep.
Yes. Which was also a really fun scene, by the by.
Yeah.
For that one, but yeah, I think there's a couple things about that sort of series of scenes. It's like, I think from Jen's point of view, and my point of view about Jen was that I just sort of wanted her to be more standoffish, more upset. And to the director's credit, you know, we did shoot some of those takes, and that's the great thing of when you have multiple takes. But in a little bit further into one way, for me, it was really feeling some of that, like, frustration about the history with my father. But I think Magic, excuse me, had a conversation with my father, and I wasn't necessarily privy to all of the information in that conversation. And so I do understand that, I think whatever Jen's relationship to her father, I think given this sort of repeat pattern that leaves her feeling really just not good about herself. I wanted her to be a lot more just outwardly angry about things and more standoffish. But I do think that because she holds Magic's opinion in such high regard, there isn't gonna, and because Magic's always gonna be really respectful of her, and she's gonna be respectful of Magic. There is a different dynamic in that relationship with Magic versus, perhaps her father in certain circumstances, and to where he's always been there for her. She knows that he always wants what's best for her. He's not going to, I don't think in that dynamic, Jen believes that Magic would choose what he wants for whatever reason at the cost of something that might be good for Jen. And so I think it comes from that. And I think also maybe just the kind of show that it is, right? You have, I'm a little bit of like an instigator, and where I'm always like, but what if Jen was like, what if she's not like, what if she struggles with being a good person? Do you know, like, what if she got, like, who knows, right? Like, what if these old sort of antics kind of come up and she kind of want to, but I think then you're sort of leading the show away from some of the core things that it is, right? Which is like heart, empathy, wanting to understand people more, and really just sort of spreading love and kind of more understanding. At least that's my interpretation of the show. I think it was, those were main components of the original, and those are things that we've prioritized here. So it starts to, basically, I think then it may start to feel like a different show.
Sure. It's really, I feel like I just made a discovery as you were talking about that, because one of the things that might set the the new series apart from the original series is that, of course, in the original series, because we're only following Sam on the leaps, it's really all about him setting right what once went wrong through the means of time travel. And an element of the revival, it's kind of just that word, right? Revival. It's the idea that you can set things right at any point in time. You just have to make the choice to do it. And I think that's kind of, with what you're talking about in particular with Jen, that's a really beautiful thing to have. It's so empowering to realize that, like, yeah, you can have somebody that's on the total wrong path, right? But that even with all these helping hands that might be around them, that it really does take their own agency, their own choice to kind of say, no, I'm going to stay on this path, instead of indulge that dark side or whatever. And I think that's kind of remarkable. And it is very different from a lot of what we see in current entertainment, quite frankly. There's still that notion that it's kind of cool to be bad. And you're right. I mean, the hope that represents, I think is pretty incredible. Let's talk a little bit about Ben's song for the defense, because I think that it illustrates some of what you're talking about so well, especially with Jen, because you get to do a lot more in this episode. You get to step into the imaging chamber and be the observer. When you found out about that, what was your reaction?
Oh, I was stoked. I was so freaking excited. I mean, I was so excited. Just because we get so little time with Ray. Ray's always an elite. He's always, Caitlin does, with, our characters get so little time with Ben. I'm harassing Ray in real life all the time. But but with and Ben are in the leaps together, and the rest of us, aside from, I think, the party scene in the pilot, I had not shot with him prior to that. So I was most excited about, that I was just basically just going to get to goof off with Ray for an episode and hang out and jump into that world. There was like a crash course in the handling. Caitlin had to like walk me through just about like how you hold it, when it might light up, where you could maybe look, and to get your information, and just and sort of the relationship that she had developed with the handling. And I was just kind of like, there was a joke that like it's like this little disc, and I don't, for the love of me, I could not keep it in freaking hand. And props started getting like really anxious about, because I would just be sitting there and I'd talk, and then it would just like fling out, and like it would break, like the thing would come over, and we put it back together. And Tony and Mike from props were just the second or third day in a row that I did that, like one of the props guy like handed it back to me with like very direct eye contact to like show his displeasure. I was like, I'm so sorry, like it's so slippery, so that was like a little, then it became kind of a running joke of like, I mean, after the second time I just started blaming it on whoever was around me, like Ray knocked it out of my hand, like I don't know, tell him not to be so emphatic when he talks or whatever, but it was amazing. I think I was really excited to, again, like I said, to be able to have scenes, between Jen and Ben, and I really, because I heard about that as a possibility before I actually got the script, and so I think I was really excited to see sort of where things would go, or what would be revealed in the relationship between those two characters, because we didn't really know, and sort of how, if there had been things that happened in the past, or getting an inkling, or getting really just an opportunity to flesh that out a little bit more. And also I think, right, Jen is a fish out of water a little bit in that episode. She's the smart, capable woman, and she can, she adapted quickly, but I think there was a few things that she just wasn't used to, and she's fine sort of like being in the background, getting the information and kind of pitching in her 2 cents about like whatever this or whatever that, but being in the moment and moving through it real time, being a part of it, and that's a lot of pressure, right? If you think about it from a character point of view, it's Ben's survival, it's the people that he leapt into, the situation, it's everybody's survival every time. And so to have to then feel that pressure real time, right? And Jen's trained for that, I think is, was a different thing, and trying to acclimate, and then on top of that, you put on top of like these isms that Jen does, right? Which is kind of like, when in doubt, be confident, like just kind of know what you're doing. And so you see some of those opportunities where she's a little bit more vulnerable, or maybe ones where she's, there's a learning curve, and then, moments where she's like, oh, no, I got this. Like, this is my element, and this is what you just got to do. Like, just be quiet, follow this thing, and it'll work itself out, So it was really great fun to be able to do all of those things really in one episode.
Yeah, I mean, like the off-track betting moment in particular, I was just, it was like, yep, that's Jen. One of the things that intrigued me is that idea that, of course, you've not shared the screen, like had a scene with Raymond, with Ben, since the first episode, and now here you are, and of course he kind of gets the advantage of not remembering you, right? So he doesn't necessarily have to load that relationship with too much stuff, but you, on the other hand, it's remarkable that all of the characters at one time or another have referred to him in some way. I say all the characters, mostly you and Ian, have referred to Ben as your best friend, and it's Addison's fiance, and it's Magic feels like he lost a son when Ben left, and all this. So the relationship is obviously very close. What's it like to kind of go in there, having all of that relationship be acknowledged, and yet not be experienced, that we haven't seen it as viewers, and you haven't had the chance to actually have those scenes and live those scenes. So I'm curious as to what that was like to just all of a sudden see this person that you have this huge history with.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both, right? Because you go in, you separately. I'm prepping my work, and with that comes ideas of what I think might happen in the scene, and how I think Ben might react to things, or his take on things. But I think as far as like the circumstances of being Jen and Ben and their relationship prior to that moment when she sees him, of course there's history. Maybe she didn't have the closest relationship to him as I think that would be with Addison, right?
Right.
But I think some of that I pull from my real life and my interactions with Ray, the actor. I think like Ray and I didn't know each other before we started shooting the show, but we have developed and relatively quickly like a sort of a sibling cousin kind of relationship. We razz each other a little. Feel very comfortable in his presence. I mean, probably most people do for Ray. He's just has that kind of like vibe about him, but I didn't knew that like I wanted to bring some of that into the relationship of our characters. So sort of my thinking, at least whenever I was talking about Ben, whenever Jen was talking about Ben, was more that relationship, right? He's a great guy, but also there is this sort of like sibling-esque connection. And he I think understands me, Jen, even though they haven't led the same life, and even though they haven't made the same choices in their life, I think. And I think some of that might come from both of us being Asian American. I think, again, Ray is just a lovely guy, but I think, I'm half Korean, Ray's Korean. We have two Korean. Well, technically, I think Mason's a tiny bit Korean, so technically we have three, people who are Korean that are in the regular cast, and there's no relation in the storyline. There's no, we're not like, it's not. Yeah. Ray and I are both a part of this main cast because we're like husband and wife or brother and sister. It's just two people that happen to be Korean, happen to be on the team, which I really, really loved. And I think for me, that was something that I noticed that I felt like was quite significant. It's small, but it's really big.
Yeah.
And I think, I can't speak for Ray, but I will say that me, Nanrisa, as a person and as an actor, I think that there is a similar sort of understanding in the way that I feel like our characters might share as well, in that us both being Asian American in choosing a profession that is non-traditional for, where there for a long time was really sort of a limited capacity in which you could work in. And I think also just even outside of acting stuff, right? Like just two people who share a culture that might be able to relate in a slightly different way, and have that connection. So I think, for Jen and Ben, I certainly used some of that thing. I think what I'm trying to say is I think it allows for a little bit of automatic, I don't know if the word is comfort or understanding a little bit of the other person, but there's just this underlying of, I would assume we would think that we would share many similar experiences, even if you were just meeting that person for the first time, just in the course of your life, interacting with the rest of this country. And so definitely that, I think, and I think in terms of circumstances between being the hologram in that episode it's yes, all of these things of this guy who you feel like is like a sibling to you, and you've been worried about him, and you see him all of a sudden and he's okay, and you see him like almost in the flesh. It's different than seeing that on a monitor. Of course it brings things up, but then you have this extra layer of like, you know, she realizes pretty quickly that he does not retain any, that it's one-sided. And so you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I'm alone here
Yeah.
in this party, you know? And then also circumstances, right? It's, yes, all of these things, feelings, and that are sort of one-sided in this moment, but also time's a ticking, you know? I'm here for a reason. There's we only have a certain amount of time. We got to keep it pushing. We'll shelve that, you know, it's that thing of, right? Like, is this, no, you don't really remember me? Okay, great. Well, moving on. Like, we'll come back to that later. And
Right.
when you do remember, I'm sure to give you, you know, flack about it. I'll make sure to, you know, bee you out about not remembering me sooner, because I feel a little offended by that. But
Yeah.
brioche. Yeah.
What a fantastic breakdown of that, because I think that I mean, it's that plays like, I don't necessarily need you to say all of that, but I love hearing it because it's illustrated so well on the screen. You know exactly what you're talking about, that urgency, that, you know, there's a job to do, but also there's this emotional connection, you know, and there's this person who's been absent from your life now for months, and you want them back just as much as everybody else does. And now you're getting to kind of share that space with him. You mentioned, you know, earlier, like that collaborative process, and you know, how costumes in particular, I feel like, you know, even for me, I know that was something that when I was finally in that costume, was just sort of like, oh, there you are, you know, to the character. It was just sort of like, that really helped to kind of make that final leap. No pun intended. And in this episode, it's rather interesting because Dennis and I both had the same feeling about the costume that you're in for the bulk of this leap. Whether it was intentional or not, it felt like something Al would wear, honestly. Like, it felt reminiscent of something that we would have seen, you know, Al in the original series. I
was the question I was going to ask. The question I was going to ask is, like, there is no dialogue that hints to that. So I was curious, like, was there any discussion on the set if that was a intentional choice?
No, it wasn't. You're talking about the dress or the suit with the tuxedo coat? The suit with the tuxedo.
The suit.
I mean,
the suit. Yeah.
Al never wore a dress in the leaps, but I thought maybe it was like the leather in it or something. That
deleted scene, 4th season. They were
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They cut that extra scene. That suit with that stripe that went down the shirt that made it look like a skinny tie is my favorite look of the whole season. I just feel, you know, I feel like
awesome.
Fiction in that outfit. I just like put on that shirt and then
yes.
Dangerous in this outfit. Like, this is crazy. You know? So glossy, you know? It feels like that / sort of Reservoir Dogs, right? It just like, I think it's because it looks like a skinny tie. It just looks so cool to me.
Right.
I think we had fit both of those outfits. So when I think we'd had a fitting for those, I think prior to that episode. You know, usually what we do is like, we'll have wardrobe fittings. You do a big one in the beginning of the season where you just try on a bunch of stuff and they photograph you, and just so you have options. And then periodically, as the season progresses, you'll do more fittings and kind of add on. And so sometimes you'll have something that you'll try on in the very beginning of the season that will show up, right? Like 10 episodes later. And you're like, oh yeah, I remember this thing. I like that. Okay, good. I'm glad they okayed it. Nobody said anything to me about that selection being specifically because of that, but I also wouldn't put it past Martin or whoever, you know, selected that outfit, or Genevieve, you know, if she was like presenting it at that moment, or, you know, absolutely, I think that could have been a possibility where Genevieve or Martin, you know, just thought like, oh, well, this feels actually like kind of, oh, this would be kind of like fitting. What do you think? You know, and I'm just not always pretty.
Yeah.
I'm just a little lower on the totem pole, so it's just like
Sure.
put on the clothes, you know. But it was fun to be able to have that. I think that tuxedo jacket does feel, you know, pretty Al, and that, you know, that he's always coming from something somewhere else, you know, too.
Right. Right.
Yep.
His normal life outside of
Right, exactly. You know, one of the things that Dean had mentioned when he was on the show back in December is that, you know, the idea of, you know, once season 2 was confirmed, the idea of being able to just really go and do completely different things and go wherever they want to do, really push the boundaries of the show and what the show can do, which I think is really cool. And the amazing thing about that is I feel like we've gotten to this point, especially since coming back from the break, where the episodes have been so consistent, so dialed in, and it feels like, wow, they know exactly what they want this show to be. And now kind of having this little thing in the back of my mind going like, yeah, and now there's the potential for them to blow that all up and do something completely different next season, which is really exciting. And I think that with this episode, with Ben Song for the Defense, it feels, I hesitate to say this because I don't want to imply at all that the show had become stale or stayed in any way, but this episode does feel kind of like a breath of fresh air. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you being the observer, and I mean, we love Caitlin and think Addison is awesome, and, you know, SOS was just such a high point, you know, for the show, for her as an actor, for everything. But it's just like, it was such a cool new dynamic to see, and it was lovely to see that. And in talking with Romy yesterday, you know, she talked a lot about how this was something that she really, you know, was really excited to do. And one of my favorite moments of the episode, of course, is the bunny speech. So I'm really curious as to when that kind of came into your hands. And then, of course, once, you know, it's up on its feet and you and Ray are, you know, doing the thing. There's just so much humor, but there's also so much heart in that moment. It's just a pretty incredible moment. And again, the chemistry between the two of you is so on point. And so I would just love to kind of hear your take on that scene, that speech, and kind of the process of filming that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Romy and I, because we started shooting that right before the winter break, and then we picked up after in January, I had more time with it for sure than I normally would. Maybe not with that scene specifically, because I think we shot that the first day.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow! Yeah. I was like, oh, there's no way. Like, this is not a headquarters scene. Like, we always start with headquarters first, and so like we'll shoot our headquarters stuff first, and and we'll come back to this stuff like after the break. And then I got the schedule, and I was like, oh no, we're shooting that like day after tomorrow. Okay. Okay, so it was like a little bit of a you know, down those 8 scenes and pick up these, you know, but it was great. I mean, I think like Romy is, you know, we had a little bit of a discussion over the break, just a couple things that I had questions about that I wanted some clarification, and she was so generous to like take the time and like us sit there and have a, you know, conversation about some certain parts in certain scenes, and I think it gave me a really great understanding in terms of where she was coming from when she wrote this episode, and really specifically my character's arc within the episode. So in the beginning of the episode, I talk about how this is not really my thing. That's not my job. I don't want to go in and go do that. And by the end, you know, I think that over the course, I'm slowly realizing, and at the end, it really sort of locks in that, I think kind of at the root of it, my opinion is that I feel like Jen, you know, part of that resistance in the beginning is like, sure, she may be working on a good guy team, and she wants to be a good person, and she's surrounded by a lot of good people, but she's not like a good guy, you know, like she's not like a superhero, you know what I mean? Like that's like an Addison thing, you know, that's like an Ian or Magic, you know, like a, you know, and so I think by the end realizing that like she really is a necessary part of this machine and this program, and that she really is like a good person who can make like good changes in the world. It does matter what she does. I think that was like a big part of my character's arc that honestly I didn't initially see, you know, and until I had a conversation with Romy about it, and you know, by the end I was like, oh, okay, like this stuff and all makes you know, there was one point where I was like having a hard time with the one point in a scene towards the end, and when she sort of, you know, it shared with me sort of where her head was at when she wrote it, and sort of what she, you know, how she felt about Jen. I was like, that's just freaking brilliant, Romy. Like, okay, well, I love this, you know, like I get it now, you know, and which is the really amazing thing about being able to work with in a collaborative setting, right? So that was sort of like one of the biggest things, you know, I think for me in that episode, in terms of understanding my character and the arc in that episode, and why Romy had written these things, you know, for me. As far as the bunny scene, I was like, I got that, and I was like, oh, this is a doozy. Like, I don't like, this is like, you know, like I promise you, if you were to sit down and transcribe that scene, like word for word, and what you think maybe the punctuation is, you know, because you try to adhere to the punctuation, you know, you respect the writing and all that stuff, and I think when I saw it, I was like, oh, I don't. Okay, this is gonna take like, it's the kind of scene where you can't just go. I mean, look, I can't. Maybe other people can. I can't just go in and just be like, you know, memorize the lines and be like, all right, let's just like let it flow on the day. I get a little. I just need to have a little bit more reassurance in my preparation than that. Otherwise, I feel like I'll get tight and distracted and focused on the wrong things. So, so for me, that was prepping. That was just like, it was, you know, exploring different options on different lines, you know, which is of course normal, but really trying to find also a rhythm in the writing, and figure out where that rhythm is and that punctuation. And I think one thing that Jen tends to do, not all the time, but it's an aspect of her character, is the way her train of thought. She will be talking about one thing, all of a sudden realize something else and completely switch awareness of that, and then come right back in and go and do this other thing. So there were certain, you know, things within that scene that I was like, well, maybe this is, you know, that would work. And then you just cross your fingers on the day and just, you know, work itself out, and people like what you're doing, and if not, then you know, then you get a note, you get some direction, or you get some suggestions, you play with other options, and then the editor has Piper, who's lovely. Hi, Piper. Has a bunch of you know, different options on the day.
You know, one of the things that I love about it too is that, again, there's so much humor at play, and you know, and Ray's reactions to all of this that, you know, that you're saying, and of course the way that you're saying everything, but then it drives to this just really wonderful, like, grounded moment of heart and hope, and you know, it just really kind of plays into what you were talking about earlier with what the show's about, and that empathy, and you literally call Ben a hero. You know, you're a hero, which I even said to Romy, I was just sort of like, I gotta be honest, like, that felt kind of risky, because if it's not, you know, if it's not done right, like, it can kind of feel a little like you're literally calling the hero of your show a hero on the show, you know. It's like, but it is so beautiful. What, you know, I mean, what do you do with that, you know, with a moment like that, when you're, like I said, you're literally calling the hero of your show a hero?
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's so generous of you. I think it really, it's for me, it was, I never really thought about it that way, honestly. Like sometimes you'll get lines and you don't even realize that like in other hands, this could be, or I'll see that for other people, like other characters, you know, where you're like, ooh, in someone else's hands, this might be a little, and you see that all the time. Sorry, finish your sentence. You like when you have auditions with your actor friends or whatever, and if you are helping somebody or whatever, someone has a certain take on something, and you're like, well, that feels a little soapy, you know, or maybe is this that kind of show?
Sure.
But I think right, because it could go in any direction. But I think knowing how I feel about Jen, you know, in moments like that, and maybe just some of her tactics and her habits and how she might address how she handles complimenting somebody or giving, you know, just the options that, right, maybe she would, what her habits are, right? It doesn't mean that it would always be the same thing, but that, you know, for Jen in particular, and in her relationship with Ben, I think at that point, they're faced with like a lot of things that seem kind of impossible. So it was a lot of different things. I think for Jen, it was like having this moment of realizing this is the fear, right? This is why she didn't want to come. This is why she didn't want to jump into the leap as a hologram.
Right.
This is not her thing. Like, you know, Addison can talk him down from somewhere, or Ian might come from a place that is like really beautifully genuine and, you know, and sweet and thoughtful. And Jen is just a little bit more of kind of a bull in a, like, I don't know, you know, you just kind of, you know, you're smart, do the thing, you know? And so, right? So I think that's a moment, right, where she gets confronted by that in herself too. And then as it kind of unfolds, this sort of like all over the place speech, she kind of starts to realize that, right, and get some clarity. And then I think at that point you can play with options, but you can say a line like that, and just have it just be the truth. Like, the way she feels about him in that moment, it doesn't have to be like overly flowery. It's the thing about, listen, I believe in you. Like, and that's just, I believe in you, and you can do, like, you know, I know you can do this. You know, you can do this. Like, just do it, you know? And so when you know how your character, you know, the emotions behind things and how your character manages their emotions behind things, I think for me, it's a lot cleaner place to come from and point of view, and like what my options would be. And then I worry less about slipping into something that maybe I won't be happy with later.
Yeah. Here's kind of a weird question going off of that. Do you think Jen has always seen Ben that way? Or do you think that that's something that, you know, she's only recently discovered after seeing him, you know, step into the accelerator, go on these leaps and, you know, change all of these things for the better?
Yeah, I think, you know, I've never really thought about that. I think in the beginning when she first met Ben, it was just kind of like, okay, new guy, let's see what you got. But, you know, to go back to relationships, her opinion of magic and magic's ability and why magic would hire somebody like Ben, there has to be a reason behind it. And it's not, you know, it's the same way that magic hired me. From the outside, someone would be like, what are you doing? You hired a felon, you know? And it's just like magic sees things, and you just trust that, right? Like you just know that there's a reason why that person is there, and whether or not, you know, you it's all upfront and like super welcoming, but it is a different case, you know, that they'll prove that to you over time. But I do think that enough time had passed, you know, before Ben went into the accelerator, that where she knew what he was made of, like the guts underneath everything. And whereas there may have been moments where it was sort of fish out of water, or you're not really sure, right? Because he wasn't supposed to be the one that was leaping. I think like, maybe not to have like, I think anybody on that team has got a similar combination of qualities that would make you think they've got a fighting chance.
Yes, I think that's a great point. I completely agree. At the end of the episode, it's an episode that is packed with, there are a lot of emotional moments. I mean, obviously Ben working with Camillo, and the stuff with Leo, and even the stuff with the relationship between the Leapy, Ben, and Vicky, and that sort of stuff. But arguably one of the, I think, most like cathartic moments, one of the more emotional moments of the episode, comes at the end when they pull up the information back at headquarters about what happens to everybody after the leap is over. And Jen obviously has a very emotional reaction to all of this. Where did that come from? And if you want to, Romy mentioned, she didn't go into any detail, but she mentioned that that the two of you talked a lot about that particular scene. I'm curious as to what type of things you were talking about, and again, like how you connected with that particular moment, because it is completely unlike anything that we've seen from Jen before.
Yeah, and I that was the scene I was talking about when I said that I had called her and I was having trouble with a certain point. There were a couple little things it was scripted that Jen breaks down and is crying, at that point where she realizes that Vicky and Aleda, joined the Innocence Project, and I just didn't, at the time, I think I thought, well, wouldn't I be more like, that's fine, but like also I know it's Ben in Aleda's body, and Ben's relationship is with Addison, and like, why would I get that emotional about them joining and then I got worried that maybe it was about Jen feeling like she had gotten sort of like Jen feeling like maybe she had gotten the short end of the stick in her experience with the law, in terms of being a convicted felon for hacking, and that was really my issue, because Jen did it. Do you know what I mean? Like, Jen broke the law, like many
yeah.
Not like she was falsely accused of anything. She did it a bunch before she got caught, and then she got caught. She was just so I don't think that Jen was, so I was concerned that this was a shift, that Jen all of a sudden felt like she had been a victim earlier in her life, and I just couldn't relate to that at all, and I didn't think that was to the character. And personally, I just thought, like, no, she like broke the law. Like, why would she ever feel like? Why would that make her emotional to the point where she could relate, like, oh, other people that have been wrongly accused, like, have a fighting chance? Like, I don't know why. But in that conversation with Romy, Romy was like, no. Like, I don't think she's looking at it from that point. What Romy had in mind when she wrote that was that it was the realization that Jen's participation in this leap led to these chain of events, and that she had made a difference, and that she actually could make a positive it's not, Jen is not just good for stealing information. Jen is like her in the moment thinking, right? Like supporting Ben, like in that squirrel scene, in the bunny scene, all that stuff is like things that maybe she thought she couldn't do, or didn't, was just like, no, like, she did those things, and that's what got everybody here to this point. Not that she was responsible for all of it, of course not, but like, I think that was something that Jen, prior to this episode, didn't think that was her thing, and so that's where that emotion came from. Is really her understanding in that moment that that she is a good guy, that she's like, she belongs here.
I love that, and I love the moment, and I thought it was a really cool choice because one of the things, oddly enough, I meant to ask this to Romy, but one of the things that I really loved is that Ben leaps before we ever actually see like the verdict come back, which obviously we know that he wouldn't be leaping had it not come back in Camilla's favor. But usually, especially in the classic series and even, in the revival, there have been times when Addison will tell Ben like what happens to everybody after the leap is over. I thought it was a really cool choice to have it happen back at the project. And obviously, the point of that, of course, is so that Jen has that moment. But yeah, I mean, it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. And it's a wonderful way to kind of leave things for this particular story. And I'm always wondering like what's next for Jen, but now I'm really wondering like where she kind of goes from here, because I think that this experience, like you're saying, it's definitely changed her in some ways, or at least, if not changed her, at least allowed her to recognize some things about herself that maybe she lacked a certain awareness of, which I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah, I agree. And I too would like to see what happens with Jen. I think
so.
Please,
go ahead.
Oh, I was.
No, I was going to shift to another topic. So please finish. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh.
Okay.
I think I was.
So I was going to.
Sorry, I'll just say my thing just in case you want to. I was going to say that to circle back to what you had said in your conversation with Dean about how their ideas for season 2, they really wanted to play with some things that they hadn't done in the first season. And again, I was like, well, gosh, it sounds like you might know more than I do. I have no clue. I think on the one hand, I'm like, I would like to know these things. I would love to like have these scripts, but this is going to sound super cheesy. I just realized that like part of the adventure for me and for everybody that's a part of this show is like, I don't know what's going to happen. And the same thing is like for Ben and like for our characters, we don't know where the season is going. We don't know, the things that we're going to discover about our characters along the way. And also on a personal level, like how that just affects you as an actor, a very fortunate one in this business and in this job, all of that stuff is just an adventure along the way. You just kind of do it when it's in front of you.
Yeah,
sure.
That's awesome. Cool. I love that.
So I was going to shift to another one of Jen's relationships. So I think like starting with fellow travelers, because I think that's when Jen goes to Belize to retrieve Janice. And I think from that episode on, between that and the interrogation scenes, like there are people like in the fandom who want to, put them in kind of a friendship. Like if they had met under different circumstances, they would be friends or at least really good colleagues. But then of course, like you have the scene, I think it's the end of Leap, Die, Repeat, where Jen takes real exception to the fact that magic kind of brings Janice into the core group, at least for that episode. So I'm curious as to like your thoughts on Jen and Janice's relationship and where you think it's going and where you want it to go.
Yeah, I personally love Janice and Georgina. I mean, I don't know if you've had a chance to the actor who plays Janice. She's fantastic.
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh, I'm sure she
not yet.
Yeah. Someone had said to me early on, I think it was Shay, who is in our costumes department, said that she was shipping us, which is, I guess, a term that the young people use.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yep.
To fantasize about our relationship.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That would be great. I would be down for that. Like, I mean, what kind of power couple would that be? As far as Jen and Janice, I think it's a complicated relationship. I think, certainly there's a certain level of admiration for each other. And for two people that, Janice is the level that I can work at, that Jen can work at as a hacker, is, in the top percentile, right, in the world. If you think about it, Janice is functioning in that percentile across multiple things, right? Like multiple categories.
Right.
So I think if you can't see that or acknowledge that, like, you just don't get who she is. She's a force. And Jen, I think, is, there's something about that perhaps that Jen admires, and Jen being scrappy and like who she is, it doesn't necessarily mean it's like you're not better than me, kind of situation.
Yeah.
But also Janice bests her a lot, particularly in the beginning of the season. And so I think that there's a little bit of an ego thing kind of going back and forth. I think there's some mutual admiration. And I would also say, I would even go so far as to say that, I don't know that this is from Janice to Jen, but from Jen to Janice, there may be a bit of an underlying thread in her observation of Magic's opinion of Janice. I think Magic is sort of Jen's surrogate father. She's, you could say, closest to him on the team. He trusts her, he sees her, and she really loves him. Like he stepped in when her dad didn't, and she has a lot of loyalty to him. And to see the opinion, for him to favor Janice, of all people, in that circumstance, in that moment when everybody is worried about Ben's life, and decide and take that, I think creates, there's some complications there, I think, in terms of how Jen feels about that, and the standing that she felt like where she was with Magic, and it brings a little instability there. So I think I have no idea if we'll see more of Janice in season 2. I would love to, because again, just Georgina is lovely to work with, and I think we always have fun shooting those scenes. I think when you get Janice and Jen in a room, and and Georgina just is just so smart, and so there's a little of this, like, who's the mouse, who's the snake, or is it, or like, is it like who, and those things can kind of shift at each moment, right? Which is the really fun thing about the dynamic in that relationship. But I hope we see more of it.
Yeah. Me too.
Me too.
I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things I think that I commented on after after Fellow Travelers is just sort of like, I just want like a road trip spinoff series between Jen and Janice where they just like go around the country, like, raising hell and fixing things along the way. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? But for a good cause, right? Like, one of the things that's interesting about Jen, and we want to wrap up soon. I want to be respectful of your time. You're being so generous with us, but do a few more questions. And one of the things that I love about Jen is that there is this intuitive quality to the way that she reads people. And, we see it with Janice, obviously. We also see it with Martinez. Obviously there's only so much that you can say, certainly at this point in the season. But, Jen pretty flatly says to Magic when they first meet Martinez, like, this is a good guy. Like, this isn't somebody who's lying to us or, bullshitting us at this particular point. What do you think? Like, do you think that Jen could be reading him wrong, or do you think that like that's just genuine? Like this guy that we're seeing right now that's not the guy that's gonna like screw everything up in the future or whatever.
I would like to say I don't think Jen is reading him wrong. I think when you think about what some of the things that are her strengths, right? Like you said, she's good at reading people. She's good at calling out. Again, when you are raised by someone who is an addict and who could lie to you and what feels like betray you, and then when you grow up kind of like in the world of like sports betting and like on the track, like with the horses, or like around, bookies and pawn shop owners, and it's just a different thing there. You learn to rely on, that sort of sixth sense, or just that intuition of like when you think someone is BSing you or not. I think the bigger thing is that like, my choice is to believe that Jen is right in that moment, but that's present day, and we don't know what happens with Martinez between that time,
sure,
and the future. That, things that happen in your life, things change people, and so you just don't
right
know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The relationship, we talked about the relationships obviously with the other cast, and I think that a moment that kind of stood out to me at the end of this episode as well, as Jen kind of has that emotional moment, reading off that they joined the Innocence Project, is that she's comforted by Ian. They're the one that's there for Jen, and it's really lovely. And I think that the relationship between the two of them has often been, very humorous, and there's been a lot of, wonderful moments throughout the season, great interplay between you and Mason. But knowing that Ian at some point leaps, there's been a lot of suspicion that's been placed on them. For you, I'm curious as to how that moment was, and just what that might mean for Jen and Ian's relationship. And also just, what you think of that relationship, what you think of Mason. Feel free to address any and all of that.
Yeah. Do you mean like how that would affect, like knowing that they had leapt in the future, how that would have affected Jen's opinion of Ian in that moment? Or how it may have changed?
Yeah, like the fact that, yeah, because I just think it's interesting that they're again, that you're getting that comfort from them, right? That there's that connection there, and yet there's a little suspicion on Ian, and I don't think that the suspicion honestly is generated from Jen specifically. I think most of it seems to be coming from like Addison at this point, frankly. But I'm just kind of curious as to what that what that kind of means for you, or for Jen anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think in that moment, like me as an actor, I wasn't thinking about that in that moment, and I would suspect, and I don't think that I don't think that this is the cop-out answer, but I think also in a moment like that, Jen, you would revert back to your base relationship, right? When your nervous system is activated, and you're experiencing all of these things, and you discover this thing about yourself, and your friend is there for you to lean on a little bit. I think because the history of the relationship between Jen and Ian, I sort of see the two of them as like not like a smarter version of Tweedledee and Tweedledum a little bit, right?
For sure.
The two in the back, like two rowdy kids, right? If Ben and Addison are like, sort of like the golden children, straight A, like achievers, like, like just hit every bullseye, Ian and Jen might just be in the back, like, whatever, like having commentary about it, like, a little bit sorry pants about it. And so I think, and Mason and I do that in real life on occasion. We do like to do together. A lot of our scenes are together, and I think that we have, over in the way that our, you know, personal friendship has really grown and sort of blossomed, and in the way that we enjoy each other, I think you do see that in Ian and Jen. And I think that wasn't something that I was expecting. I wasn't expecting for Jen and Ian to have kind of that specific dynamic in the beginning. I was really expecting there to be a lean, you know, because it felt like Ian and Addison were so close, and Ian was sort of Addison's rock for things. But then I don't know, maybe that's just something that, like, between Mason and I, you know, that sort of just came out. We are sometimes a bit like two sort of like rowdy, kind of rascal, mischievous, like kids in the background, you know, you know, and we do.
That's
like
so awesome.
Yeah, but it is, but I think also, you know, in the same, like in the dynamic of the show, like, you know, sometimes the director or the first AD is just like, okay, got to go, but we are liberties a little bit, because I do think that we are good at what we do, you know, and yeah, we might kind of like
for sure
joke around a little bit and kind of, goof off, but you know, of course, when they call action, we're just, you know, you go in, you do your job, and that's the fun of being able to have this many days on set with the same cast, the same crew. You know, you develop these sort of nuances, and so I was actually surprised, that sort of developed out as quickly as it did, and also that people saw that. There was something early on in it. I can't remember which one it was. Oh, it's when we say Leaper X, and then they say Leaper X,
yes,
and Ernie says it by accident. We get Ernie to say it, and there's just a little bit of a we do a little bit. It's not like a high five, but it's just a little bit of like a thing, you know, that just goes kind of under the radar. I think we just do like a little slap and a dap or something, and that wasn't scripted. That was just all supposed to be, and we just thought, you know, we spent a lot of time together. Clearly, this is something like that. We're just like, do it, you know. We're just like, quiet, congratulations,
right.
We don't need to like think bad about it, because we're not supposed to be, you know. But just a little bit of that, like two like clowns in the back of the class, like we're listening, you know. And I think like that
right.
fun. Yeah, I love working with Mason, for the record. I think like we I don't know how Ray would feel about me saying them, but like Ray had said to me recently that they had we were shoot I don't know if this is a spoiler or not. Ray was saying how he didn't know what it was like to work with Mason, and we were just discussing. I was talking about what it was like to shoot, like, and just how fun that is. And so I think like, you know, because you think about Ray doesn't have that experience with everybody. Ray doesn't shoot with Magic or me or you know, or Ian. And so you know, it's an equal miss out, you know, we kind of miss out on that. And so, you know, hopefully in, you know, 2 or whatever, some of that we'll have opportunities to kind of switch that up.
Yeah, I could imagine that, like, for Raymond, that there is that sort of like, man, I don't get to work with any of you all. Like, you know, like, it's just like, you know, he's not there with, you know, with the rest of you much. Okay, here's a silly question, perhaps a silly note to go out on, but talking about kind of cutting up with Mason and having fun on set, who is most likely to crack you up on set? Not even necessarily make you break like in a scene, although I'm curious about that too, but who's the most likely to get you to laugh?
To get my laugh, I would say, you know, it's not fair because, again, I have really only shot with Ray this one episode.
Sure.
But it's Mason. Mason is just the one that is gonna.
Mhm.
There's just too many inside jokes at this point, and too many like one look, and I know it's there's just too much of a history of us like goofing off, for it not to be Mason. And I think because we, the three of us, really the four of us, everybody except for Ray shoot together so often. I think we've gotten to, we get to know each other and sort of like the little things that will set somebody off. And so, so Mason knows a little bit where my buttons are, and also like kind of how to get, right? Like how to get under my skin, but also like how to like cause disruption in the quickest. It's definitely.
Oh, that's great.
I call them the baby because they're kind of like the baby of our crew, and I'm like, oh, baby's not happy, baby's upset. Nope, baby's being bad.
This is the thing that we need to have on the Peacock extras. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I said this is the thing that we need on the Peacock extras. Like they give all the extra stuff for all the things that we need for like the Peacock extras that they give. They give so much stuff for the Office fans. Like this is the stuff that we need for Quantum Leap fans.
Right.
You should do it. You should just pitch the Peacock and be like, listen,
I'd be happy to
put us on the payroll, NBC. Put us well.
Yeah. Right? You need a PTS team. It would be hilarious.
Yeah.
Mason and I did a little.
I would be.
Well, then
it would be awesome.
Yeah.
E did like a little. We had some press on set the other day, just doing quick interviews in between setups, and they made the mistake of putting me and Mason together for one. They wanted to interview us together, and I don't know. I mean, it was like after lunch. I was loopy. I was probably like on my third coffee. I was like, I don't even know. Like they were probably like, is she drunk? What's going on? And it's just like Willie during the interview and was just like, I don't know. I'm just here hanging out. It can be. I enjoy it so much now. Sometimes we can be a little bit. We can kind of throw things off the rails. So sorry. But yes, that's why we need those extras, because I think it's fun.
Yeah. Well, we've actually talked to Dean before too about like the idea of like a physical release, like the Blu-ray set or something, something like that, to have some of those types of features, because people do want them, because there are, we've heard about scenes that have been cut before, things like that. I think Dennis actually has a question he wanted to ask you about that before we get out of here. But yeah, it would be lovely to have access to that sort of stuff, because I mean the fandom is definitely there for it. They would love to see more of that, and I think we've been so fortunate enough to get glimpses as to the cohesiveness, to the comfortability, to that spirit of collaboration that takes place, not just between the cast, but, as you mentioned earlier, writers, producers, directors, costumers, editors, everybody. There just seems to be such genuine good feelings. And it's inspiring to see, it really is, just from the outside looking in. Like it's really wonderful, because there are times when you love a show and you love so much about it. And, and then there's you hear about this thing or that thing or whatever. And it's just really nice to kind of just be like, no, this is good vibes and I like it.
Yeah. I think we're all really fortunate.
Oh, so the question that Sam alluded to, I was going to ask. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, it's the lag.
So the question I was going to ask, are there any moments, no, it's all good. Are there any moments that Jen has had, like cut scenes that were just like cut out for time, that you really hated that they cut because they were just like wonderful moments for the character?
I think again in the repilot there was a scene or part of that scene that got cut that I would just be curious to see. I think it felt really good when we shot it. It was funny. It was one of those ones where it was like they're doing your coverage and the people that you're talking to are like breaking, and you're like, this is not help me stay on task, and they're like, it's not like just not to like pat myself on the back too much, but I would be curious to see that one just because it felt so good. But in general, like you'd say, I think I can only think of one other scene off the top of my head that I've shot that didn't end up. Maybe they'll edit things a little tighter or cut, sections of it out. But as far as whole scenes, I can really only think of one other time where that happened. And I know that it's always just because there's hopefully like just too much good stuff to choose from. So,
Sure.
but I think, like, again, at the risk of sounding cheesy, like, just doing it, just the satisfaction of, like, working that material, prepping it, being ready for it, shooting it feeling so good, and it being fun, and knowing that it's, like, that it got shot, it got made, like, it's, like, I'm good with that, I think, and we have so many
awesome.
other opportunities to kind of strut our stuff.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. That's lovely. Well, Dean told me to ask you about poker chips, but I'm not going to do that. And instead, I will say thank you so much. You've been so kind, so generous with your time. This has been a blast, and I sincerely hope we get the chance to do it again sometime.
Likewise. I mean, it was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I would love to.
Thank you so much for being here. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, Nanrisa, take care. And the episode, of course, Ben's Song for the Defense. It's a great showcase for Jen. We hope everyone enjoys it as much as we did. I think it's genuinely one of my favorite episodes of the season, in no small part due to getting more Jen in our lives. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks.
What a good time.
I know, so much fun. Romy was just fantastic. Enjoyed hearing about her process, her thoughts on the show overall, getting, a window into some of those moments, in particular, the idea of like how Magic would have reacted to the betting, the Marty McFly Sports Almanac moment. I thought was wonderful. But she's just so, speaking with passionate, intelligent people is such a joy, quite frankly. I mean it. It's clear these are very smart people. It's kind of like what Dean said in the SOS interview last week about when people don't think that they're thinking about these things, it's like, of course, like we're approaching this from every angle, and it's clear that they are, because again, these are very smart, talented, hardworking, passionate people that love this show, that love what they do, and it comes across, in Romy talking about the episode and the writing of the episode. I can't wait to see her next episode, which obviously we're gonna have to wait some time for. That'll be season 2, but that'll be super exciting. And yeah, just really cool. And then Nanrisa, just what a great energy, what a great vibe, what a great conversation. It was so fun to talk to her, and it was so fun to learn about her process, about the way that she views the show and the way that she views the character of Jen. And I just loved the down-to-earth nature of talking about those moments that might have been challenging for her, or those moments that, she second-guessed herself on maybe. And it reminded me a lot too of like what Caitlin talked about. And I think it's important for viewers to take note of, like, early on when a show is first starting out, and sometimes we make these criticisms of like early episodes of a show. It's just sort of like, y'all, they're still learning, these characters, and not just the actors, the writers, the producers, they're all still learning who these people are and how they interact. And it's just amazing to see that grow and to see that, evolve over time. And obviously we've gotten to see Jen in particular just become, a huge, fan favorite character that people love. And I think that that's just a testament to the show, that when I say, Jen's a fan favorite, immediately I'm like, well, yeah, but everybody loves Ben, and people love Addison, and people love Magic, and of course, everybody loves Ian. So it's like, it's just a case where the cast just clicks, and they've done such a wonderful job telling these character stories, and growing as the show has gone on, that you can't help but be engaged and love them. And I do, and it was just such a joy to get to talk to her and learn about things from her perspective.
Absolutely. And the benefit of recording all of this, I haven't heard Romy's interview yet, but I'm really looking forward to hearing that and the thoughts on Magic. I just had the thought.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I want now in my head canon. I want this thing of like Magic's reaction to the Sports Almanac is that he wouldn't get that reference. He wouldn't get Back to the Future because after having been leapt into, until he figured out what Project Quantum Leap was, he always had this weird fucking aversion to time travel movies and TV shows. He just couldn't figure out why. And that's why all the time travel, timey-wimey stuff makes his head hurt.
It just goes.
There's my.
I love it.
Not that he's not smart enough for it. It's just that he just doesn't want to deal with it because of his own personal experience. Anyway.
Well, my new headcanon is that Jen recently went out and rented the Back to the Future trilogy and watched it, and that's why we're getting so many Back to the Future references from Jen over the past few episodes. Because during Leap Die Repeat, when she was sort of like, I don't get any of this, she was like, I gotta learn more about time travel. So she just ran out and was like, all right, so Back to the Future, here we go.
Well, didn't Ian Marty McFly reference her? Wasn't she the one that said, "Hey, McFly, calm down"?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Well, no, with Jen, no, because Jen is like, "What about in Back to the Future?" You know, with the disappearing thing. Like, she references the picture, and then Ian is like, "Calm down, McFly." Yeah, so it's like a joint reference. Yeah, maybe they had a watch party. Maybe they all got together over at Addison and Ben's place, and instead of watching The Real Housewives, they watched Back to the Future, back to back. All three of them, one epic viewing party. I want to be at that viewing party.
Oh, my head's swirling with ideas. Like, just get the cast to come on, and not even do a special like patron thing. Like we'll just do like a commentary with Back to the Future. We'll just like.
Oh my gosh! Can you imagine?
Yeah. No one would listen to that.
Listen to that. Everybody would listen to that. Are you kidding me? All right. Yeah. We should get the hell out of here. Look,
yes,
awesome episode, awesome interviews. Yeah. So lucky.
Fantastic.
Love that we get to do this. Love that we get to share it with everyone who's listening. Still listening after all this time. Thank you all so much. Dennis, anything else from you before we leap out of here?
No, that's it.
All right.
Love y'all.
I guess Siri had something to say about it. So anyway, look, thank you all so much. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Stay safe out there. And remember to always leap responsibly. Let's set some things right that might be going wrong out there. Take care all. Thanks.